Hi, it's me again. By now, maybe you've watched the first DVD and have enjoyed it enough to stay with us. Now, this DVD is going to include some fascinating visits that I've had with numerous presidents and first ladies, as well as our coverage of some of the most important news events and scandals of the past 20 years.
I, Gerald R. Ford, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Part of the mythology.
I marvel at this light.
I didn't know I was shot.
Now I'm in big trouble.
Never give up. Rub me the wrong. If somebody hit you, knocked you down, you were supposed to get up.
Just cut that out.
It has been my honor and my privilege to have interviewed all the presidents since Richard Nixon. We visited them in the White House, in the CNN studios, and at points in between. We were fortunate to be able to talk with them when they were up and when they were down, when they were in and out of favor with the American public, when they were open and charming or reticent and guarded. You know, when you consider the demands and dangers of this job, it's amazing to me that anyone would want to do it.
What is it like to be shot? I mean, we all think about that. We've watched it in movies. You've played it in movies. You've been shot and shot others. What's it like?
Well, I'll tell you what
to
it's
be really
like.
shot.
What it was like was I didn't know I was shot. I heard a noise, and we came out of the hotel and headed for the limousine, and I heard some noise, and I thought it was firecrackers. And the next thing I knew, one of the Secret Service agents behind me just seized me here by the waist and plunged me headfirst into the limo. I landed on the seat, and the seat divider was down, and then he dived in on top of me, which is part of their procedure to make sure that I'm covered. Well, as it turned out later, the shot that got me caromed off the side of the limousine and hit me while I was diving into the car. And it hit me back here under the arm and then hit a rib. And that's what caused an extreme pain. And then it turned instead of edgewise and went tumbling down to within an inch of my heart. But when I got in the car, I hadn't felt anything. He landed on top of me, and then the pain, which now I know came from the bullet hitting that rib. That terrific pain, and I said, "Jerry, get off. I think you've broken a rib of mine." And he got off very quickly. And just then I coughed, and I had a handful of bright red frothy blood. So I said, and I guess evidently the broken rib has pierced the lung. Well, he simply turned and said George Washington Hospital, and we were on our way. I was wearing a suit like this. For the first time I'd ever worn it. It was brand new, and they were taking scissors and cutting it off of me.
And you were thinking, what did they do? Did you ever think you might die?
No, although I didn't just leave it to chance. I talked to my friend upstairs about that.
The President of the United States is quoted as telling his wife at his hospital bed, "Honey, I forgot to duck."
It's a lot more serious than we thought it was, right?
Oh, much.
I mean, he was, how close would you say? I mean, time has evolved now. How close? Touch and go?
Yes. Oh, yes. They couldn't find the bullet. When they did find it, it was a quarter of an inch from his heart. He had lost so much blood. He was so close to going into shock. And if he had, of course, that would have been it.
Let's go. Hey! My God, there's been a shot. There's been a shot. We don't know if anybody's been hit. My God. Somebody fired a shot.
What about being shot at?
Well, I had two experiences.
one in Sacramento when Squeaky Fromm, a member of the Manson gang, tried to... She's still in jail. Well, I had gone to breakfast at a hotel across from the state capitol, and I was walking along the walk, and I noticed as I walked along a lady in a red dress following behind the first row of people who were there greeting me. And as I went to shake hands, a hand appeared with a pistol in it about as far as you are from me. And Larry Boondorf, one of my Secret Service agents, very alertly saw it, grabbed the pistol, and prevented her from pulling the trigger.
Did you see it?
Well, I saw the pistol.
What was that like?
Scared the heck out of me. And then, of course, about a month later, I came out of the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco after making a speech for the San Francisco Foreign Policy Group. As I walked out of the hotel to get into the car, a shot took place, and fortunately it missed me.
After the first attempt on his life by Squeaky Fromm, every time he left the White House, I used to go on the balcony and pray that somehow he would come back and avoid anything like that again.
Are there days you question your faith?
Not anymore. There have been a couple of times when I've questioned my faith very seriously. One was when my father died. He was the first member of my family who passed away quite young. The other time was when I lost the governor's election in 1966, and the guy that beat me was Lester Maddox, a racist who won the race because he would stand in front of his restaurant and with a pick handle, and anybody who came up that was black, he would beat him over the head with it, and that won the election. And I thought that God had betrayed me because I thought I'd be better for Georgia.
What do you think now? Did God betray you, or he didn't?
Oh, no. Now I'm much more mature in my faith. I don't have any doubt that God answers all the prayers. Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no, and sometimes the answer is, you got to be kidding.
We sat together here quite a few times. I remember once we were looking out, you said to me, my bad days are good days.
Absolutely. I love this job.
You love this job.
I do. And I'll miss it. People ask me all the time, what will you miss most? Will it be living in the White House, going to Camp David, getting on Air Force One? The job is what I'll miss most, the work. There is no place in the world where you can come in contact with so many different kinds of people and so many different kinds of issues and have so much opportunity to do good or stop bad things from happening.
I drive down 123 and I pass by the George Bush Center for Strategic and International Studies. I land at the airport, and your name is on the airport. Being a former president, seeing your name on buildings, what's that like?
It's overwhelming, because my mother taught me from a little boy on till the last day she died of her life practically, don't brag about yourself. Talk about how the team did, not how you did. Once I said I was off my game, she said, you didn't have a game, get out and practice. I mean, so when I see these things, it's great. It's
wonderful. You land at George Bush International.
Yeah, and I hear the pilot say, George Bush, and I lean over here.
And you land at Ronald Reagan going the other way.
That's right.
And Governor Richards said the other day, I left Ronald Reagan and landed in George Bush.
Hey.
And, with all you've been through, and with all this regrowth, and so many things happening forward, why look back? Why write a book that has to have pain?
Well, sometimes it's necessary to look back so that you don't make the same mistakes in the future. But I couldn't agree with you more that you shouldn't look back any more than you find necessary in order to have that therapy so that you can concentrate only on the future.
So why did you?
Well, in this instance, I wrote this book, as I indicated in the dedication, for my family. For my family, I mean not only my immediate family, but also for my official family. I felt it was important for them to see what I had been through, but I also wrote it for the future. You will find that I'm trying to tell young people particularly that life is not just always a bowl of cherries, that life can have its ups, it can have its downs, and that the main thing just to remember is never give up, always keep fighting.
What is the toughest part of being president?
Well, the toughest spot, Larry, is that You have to be available 24 hours a day, every day of the year. And you never know when something is coming up that could bring about a challenge to the United States at home and abroad. You just have to expect the worst and always assume the best will take care of itself.
Mrs. Bush, how has your husband changed since becoming president? Biggest change?
Don't talk about the hair.
The gray hair, I guess.
What else?
He hadn't really changed that much. I mean, you know, he has a very solid, very centered personality. He always has. He's got a lot of discipline. He still does. I mean, are we under more stress? Sure. Do we worry about things? Absolutely. But I think in this house, when you live here in this house, above the shop, so to speak, we live right in the apartment
That's right,
above
you live
here.
above the store.
That's right. That's right. So work is 24 hours. I mean, you think about it all the time, I think, because that's where you are.
Well, you've had a press conference on that, and I've heard what my statement is.
What do you have to say about it? What do you tell them?
No, I'm not going to take any questions on the photo opportunity.
To get them there?
What?
Is there anything you can do to get them to the end?
Doing everything we can. Doing everything we can.
We know that you're hard of hearing, but it's not due to the aging process.
Oh.
Tell that. This is really fascinating.
Well, I began finding that, particularly with the one side, I was having a great deal of difficulty in hearing, and finally I went to the very distinguished Dr. House, and he did find that, yes, the hearing was very low. I remembered a movie that I made many years ago, and me and another actor were running from the bad guys and went to get behind a tree and start shooting at them. And I'm afraid that my fellow actor didn't know much about guns, because as we turned around the tree, he was just behind me. He put that .38 right up on my shoulder and pulled the trigger. And you know, the concussion actually knocked me 3 or 4 feet to the side. And then Dr. House said, "Say no more." That's what did it, and it was a deterioration then of the nerves that took place over the years.
Was there a good comparison between the two, politics and acting? Did you utilize one with the other? I mean, critics would say you did. Do you feel you did?
Well, I'll have to tell you this one thing. I know that I took an awful lot of abuse when I was running, because people said, "What is anyone have the nerve to be an actor and think they could be president of the United States?" I have to tell you, there were a number of times when I thought, could you do that job if you hadn't been an actor?
Why didn't you go to the NFL? You had 3 teams were after you, and you chose to go to Yale.
Well, when I got through Michigan, I was offered opportunities at the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions, but I had a chance to go to Yale as an assistant football coach and go to law school at the same time. So that opportunity was so wonderful. I couldn't turn down the chance to further my education and earn some money in the meantime.
See what a mistake. You could have made something out of yourself. What a mistake you made. Are there ever times you say, I would have liked to have played pro football?
I would, in retrospect, like to have played 1 year just to prove that I could. But the opportunity to go to Yale and be an assistant coach and go to law school at the same time might not have been available.
How do you explain the friendship with President Bush?
Well, I just like him. First of all, I've always liked him. I've always admired him. I mean, he gave his life to public service. He comes from a family who did. So I share an interest in public service. He likes sports. I like sports. He likes people. And I think he's a genuinely good man. I like him. I like his wife. I like his family. I've liked him since I first met him in 1983, 2 years before you went on the air here.
There's a perception that if you run against somebody, you're enemies. Well, Bill Clinton and I were not enemies. When I was president, he was a Democrat governor in charge of the educational summit. He headed it up for the Democratic governors. We worked very closely together. And admittedly, when you get run against each other, the elbows get a little sharp. But he knows that I did not criticize him excessively when he was president. And I just enjoy being with the guy. And he is very considerate of me. I'm, old enough to be his dad.
But this tsunami thing has brought you closer, right?
Oh, no question about it. What we saw out there just breaks your heart, and he's been good to work with.
Do you keep in touch with other presidents?
I keep in close touch with President Ford. He and I have developed a very intimate and close personal friendship, so we exchange telephone calls and letters and so forth quite regularly, and have ever since Sadat's funeral, when we really got acquainted after I was lucky enough to defeat him for president.
Jimmy and I are very good friends.
Do you have good chemistry? What is it?
Oh, yes. That was an interesting experience. President Reagan sent Nixon, Carter, Ford to the Sadat funeral, and we flew from Washington to Cairo. That's a long flight. We all sat in a confined area. We got very well acquainted.
When you hold the highest office in the land, you are also held to a higher standard of morality. And sometimes, even the most intelligent and forthright leaders get caught up in the pitfalls of power. Each man has dealt with his own personal issues in a very human way. And it was quite an experience to hear them one-on-one express their feelings and thoughts or regrets about the mistakes they may have made.
When you drive by those collections of buildings, the hotel, the 2 apartment houses, the office building, you feel weird, funny?
Oh, no, I never give it a thought.
Never give it a thought?
Never give it a thought. That's one place where you just don't look back. As far as Watergate is concerned...
Yeah, no, you don't look up at the buildings themselves?
Not at all. Not at all. As a matter of fact, I've never been in the Watergate. Never been
in the hotel?
Never been in the hotel, never been in the restaurant. I'm not one for going out that much anyway, as you know. And under the circumstances, though, I've never been there. I have many friends who live there, and they tell me it's very nice.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
In all my public and private acts as your president, I expect to follow my instincts of openness and candor with full confidence that honesty is always the best policy in the end. My fellow Americans, our long national nightmare is over.
Was President Nixon the one to tell you, I'm resigning, you are going to be president? How were you told that?
Well, he asked me to come to the Oval Office and asked me to sit down. I had known Dick Nixon for 20-some years. We were good personal friends.
In the House together, right?
And that's right. And I supported him when he was up for election. He asked me to sit down, and he said, Jerry, I'm going to resign tomorrow, and I want you to know that I have full confidence that you can carry on, particularly the foreign policies that we have agreed on over the years, and whatever domestic problems we have.
What'd you say?
I said, well, I wish this was not going to happen, because I really had hoped that the things that had come to light were not the truth or were not justifying his resignation. So I was saddened because a friend was taking that very dramatic step, but the facts were there and he had no choice.
I, Gerald R. Ford, have granted, and by these presents do grant, a full, free, and absolute pardon unto Richard Nixon.
You might well have been reelected if you didn't pardon Richard Nixon. It was a very close election. That was very controversial. Had to do it all over again, still do it?
I certainly would, and I'm more convinced today, Larry, than I was in 1974.
Why?
Because the public now understands why I did it, or a majority of the public does, and that reassures me. Of course, when I did it in September of 1974, I was absolutely convinced that the only way for me as president to spend 100% of my time working on the problems, foreign and domestic, for the American people was to get the Nixon problem off my desk.
Thank you. Colonel, would you stand up, please, and let me administer oath? You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you very much, Colonel. You're duly sworn. Be seated. let me just say...
Since I have been so closely associated with the cause of the Contras, the big question during the hearings was whether I knew of the diversion. I was aware the resistance was receiving funds directly from third countries and from private efforts, and I endorsed those endeavors wholeheartedly. But let me put this in capital letters. I did not know about the diversion of funds. Indeed, I didn't know there were excess funds. Yet the buck does not stop with Admiral Poindexter, as he stated in his testimony. It stops with me. I am the one who is ultimately accountable to the American people.
Ollie North said yesterday, you are the man of the decade. Now, how do you react when you, I'm sure you heard that. How do you react?
Well, now, I have to admit, that gives you a warm feeling inside to hear someone say that, who was particularly someone who was around when it was going on.
How do you feel about him?
About Ollie North?
Yeah.
Well, I have difficulty in talking about this situation that he was directly involved in, because it is still before the law and all, and I could create some problems if I made statements.
Did you personally like him?
Yes, and he had a great military record of courage and certainly of taking care of the men.
You know, the clock is running down on the Republicans in Congress, too. I feel for them, I do. They've only got 7 more months to investigate me. That's a lot of pressure. So little time. So many unanswered questions. One thing I knew, the Whitewater thing was a total fraud, and I thought the people who were pursuing it knew it was a fraud at some point. They had to, especially 4 or something years ago when the government report came out, the RTC report, saying that neither my wife or I had done anything wrong.
And every time there's been any kind of official investigation or report, what people alleged has been proven to be not true, and eventually that's what the American people will see of all of these politically inspired investigations.
Mr. President, Monica Lewinsky's life has been changed forever. Her family's life has been changed forever. I wonder how you feel about that, and what, if anything, you'd like to say to Monica Lewinsky at this minute.
That's good.
On the personal level, when you say you did it because you could do it, you did it because it was there. A lot of people, I think we need some elaboration, because people are taking that
wrongly.
I
think
what did you mean?
Everybody who reads it in the book will see that I was rebuking myself, not being flippant. What I meant by that, let me get into what I said. First I said, when you make a mistake past the age of accountability, there's no excuse for it. On the other hand, only a fool doesn't try to understand and explain to himself why he made mistakes he made. I have been through a period of a couple of years where I've lost the Congress, and I think I've done terrible damage to it, where the Republicans have taken over the Congress and they're trying to change my country, I believe, for the worse. We're in the middle of the first government shutdown ever, or right at the beginning of the second one, and I don't know who's going to win. We're in this titanic struggle for the future of the country. And meanwhile, I got this guy, Starr, who's trying to put me and Hillary in jail, and all these guys in Congress now in the majority holding hearings acting like it's serious and tormenting people who work for me, people who have been friends of mine. It was like crazy. Half the time I thought, well, man, I'm lost in the funhouse.
I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
In a deposition in January, I was asked questions about my relationship with Monica Lewinsky. While my answers were legally accurate, I did not volunteer information. Indeed, I did have a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate. People who live parallel lives, as I described that, grow up in alcoholic homes, for example, very often when they're angry, exhausted, or under great stress, are vulnerable to go down the wrong track of their parallel lives. And that's what I meant by that. I knew better than to do it. I didn't really want to do it at some level, but I could do it. It was there, and I did it. So when I say I did it because I could, if you take it out of context, it sounds jolting and snippy and arrogant and unfeeling toward Monica Lewinsky or my family or anything else. That is not what I meant. I meant if you, well, you know, you've lived long enough to make a few mistakes. Anybody that's lived a certain time's made some mistakes. If you look back on your life and you think about the things that you did wrong that you knew at the time you shouldn't do, about the best explanation is you did it because you could. Mm-hmm. Not just in this context, in many contexts. And I said that hoping that a lot of young people who still look up to me and believe in my politics and believe in what I tried to do would guard against making decisions just because they could. I said that in the hope of showing people why that's not a good reason to do things.
And do you think it's also due to immediate gratification?
Yeah, I think when you think that everything you've lived for and worked for may crumble, that may be part of it too. But it doesn't matter. I still knew better than to do it.
Did you ever fear divorce?
I just didn't know. What I feared is that I had hurt Hillary and Chelsea irrevocably, and that we might not ever be able to make it all right again. I was actually lucky. I said one time I was probably fortunate in my tormentors, because when they decided to go ahead and pursue this impeachment thing, Hillary thought what they were doing for me was, to me, was, and to the country and to the Constitution, was even worse than what I had done to her. And I joked in the book, but it was halfway serious, that those guys that were after me were probably the only people on the face of the earth that could have made me look good to Hillary again. And so in a way I was kind of, you know, I guess I owe them a big debt of gratitude.
Every 4 years, the American people vote to determine who will be the next president of the United States. Along with the president comes the woman, who will be known as the First Lady. We're fortunate that all of our presidents have been married to some very impressive women who have adjusted their lives in different ways to fulfill the expectations and responsibilities of this new title.
How is Mrs. Nixon?
Remarkably well. Politics, Larry, is much harder for the women than for the men, for the wives, because they have to suffer in silence.
They're the recipient.
Yeah, they can't get in the ring and fight. They've got to suffer in silence.
You are, in later life as you were in earlier life, you're kind of inseparable, the two of you.
Yeah.
Can you explain that? I mean, we all know about love affairs, but yours is different. How do you explain that? Is this just fate?
But everything just fell into place with Ronnie and me. We completed each other.
But oh, my dear, our love is here to stay. Together we're going a long, long way. In time the Rockies may crumble, Gibraltar may tumble.
Did you hit it off right away?
Right away. Right away. Uh-huh. It was a blind date, as you know. It was a blind date. I knew right away. Took him a little bit longer.
Did you have to work on it?
I had to push him a little bit.
What was it, in retrospect?
I don't know. He was so unlike any actor I'd ever known. He wasn't talking about himself all the time. He was interested in so many things. He was nice looking also. Didn't hurt.
Did he propose?
Of course. He called my father.
Before he asked you?
Mm-hmm.
And
my father said fine.
And how did he ask you and where?
He asked me at home.
And he said, casually, I called your dad.
Yes. And it's all right with your family. Is it all right with you?
Do you have a secret of longevity?
Married the right girl, Larry.
That part, but that was 30 years ago. That was you were in your 30s.
I was 35 at the time, but Betty and I have had a tremendously successful married life, and
even with the ups and downs, and Betty had her problems.
Those kind of problems are the things that you have to anticipate, you have to face up to, you have to work at. And if you do, it turns out real well. It strengthens, actually, the relationship.
The fact we've been married 55 years is kind of nice. And we appreciate that. You know, every day we just thank the good Lord for the days He's given us. And we just hope to keep going as Jerry says, another 50.
Rosalind, you're married 56 years. What is the secret of your longevity in that area?
Space. I think you need some space. He was in the Navy gone when we first got married. I had to take everything. I became very independent, taking care of the children and so forth. And I started working in our farm supply business, took an accounting course, knew as much on paper or maybe more about the business than he did. He would come to me and ask me things about the business. And so we kind of developed a mutual respect for what each other could do. And it's been that way ever since.
We learned a long time ago, I guess, a couple of things. One is that we always try to communicate with each other, even when we have a sharp argument or difference of opinion, and there have been a lot of them. And the second thing is, as Rosen said, we give each other plenty of space so that each one of us can do our own things without interference from the other.
When I married Laura, I found the person I wanted to spend my life with the rest of my life. And Laura's had a fantastic effect on my life at all age.
Was your feeling instant for him, too?
It was.
Really?
I mean, it was pretty, maybe not actually instant, but pretty shortly after that.
I had a little persuading to do, is what she means.
A little courtship.
Had a few rough edges that she was worried about.
Did your parents approve right away?
Absolutely. You kidding me? They fell in love faster than I did.
Is yours still a love affair?
I don't know about him, but I sure love him. I think he's the greatest man I ever knew. I wake up every single morning and look over at that funny old face and say, I'm the luckiest woman in the world. That's lucky, isn't it?
Still feel the same way about?
Yeah, 56th wedding anniversary in January coming up.
What was your son's inaugural like for you?
It was thrilling. It was wonderful. I was very proud of him and proud of Laura. I think maybe Laura's been the biggest surprise for America. What a woman.
She turned George's life around, didn't she, Laura? I mean, she helped him a great deal during tough periods.
His life wasn't that tough, but she made him perfect. It wasn't, George was never a problem.
Even in the days when he was in college, the character was there. I mean, he was a very...
He's a leader. He has friends, and they rally round. And they've helped him all his life. Barbara, you know, you've heard rumors about the dancing nude on the bar and pictures. My wife put it well. She said, I hope it's not a frontal shot. And,
I actually said this in New Hampshire. I appreciate preservation. It's what you do when you run for president. You got to preserve. I don't have the slightest idea what I was saying there.
He kids about it himself, but as a former teacher, do you get a little annoyed with some of your husband's grammatical errors?
Well, actually, no, not really. I mean, he doesn't make that many grammatical errors. I think it just got to be, anybody who gives as many speeches as he gives is bound to make a few errors.
We have a television first, the first interview of Barney.
Barney will probably say no comment. He's a very quiet dog, but
This
isn't
is
he cute?
Scottish
This is our
Terrier.
new puppy. He's just 7 months old. I got him for my birthday. George gave him to me for my birthday.
And who named him?
The girls named him Barney.
Now, who's the other dog?
Now that is Spot, who was born at the White House, Millie's pup.
Oh,
She's
yeah,
12
that's
years
just like
old.
Millie.
She was born in 1989 here at the White House.
Is the president a dog lover, too?
He's a dog lover, and he really likes cats.
Don't touch the cat.
Do you personally have a favorite name that you hope they use?
Well, I have made some submissions to the Commander-in-Chief about the dog name, but it's up to him. He's going to have to decide.
It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog in a crate that he'd sent all the way from Texas. Black and white, spotted. And our little girl, Tricia, the 6-year-old, named it Checkers. And you know, the kids, like all kids, love the dog. And I just want to say this right now, that regardless of what they say about it, we're going to keep it.
That speech, which became known as the famous Checker speech, actually saved Nixon's career. All politicians have had to learn how to deal with the media for their survival, especially presidents.
To make an announcement
myself. Would the sound man please turn Mr. Reagan's mic off for a minute?
Is this on? Mr. Green,
Did you turn that microphone
you
off,
asked
please?
for me if you would... I am paying for this microphone, Mr.
Well, you had a good time with the president. You got along well.
Well, there seemed to be a hostility. There was an I felt, and I think properly, that in every press conference there was an adversarial relationship. They weren't there to get just some news. They were there to trap me into some kind of boner.
The polls show that a lot of American people just simply don't believe you. That the one thing that you've had going for you more than anything else in your presidency, your credibility, has been severely damaged. Can you repair it? What does it mean for the rest of your presidency?
Well, I imagine I'm the only one around who wants to repair it, and I didn't have anything to do with damaging it.
Some of the things that take place when there is a hostile situation, and the press comes forth with a story, and they say they can't name the source of the story, that this has been denied them the right to do, and then they say something that must be of great value to the enemy. They reveal secret movements and so forth. This was why, with regard to the Grenada experience, I kept that the best and most total secret in all of the 8 years. I didn't even tell my own press secretary.
Why didn't we know more that you're basically, liberal may be wrong, you're certainly a moderate. You certainly were a balance in that White House.
The whole perception of me went like that. I mean, one time I was considered to be just occupied with clothes and fashion and very superficial things. Then I went to, I don't know, inventing the nuclear bomb or something, and firing people.
Arch right-wing.
Arch right-wing.
You were painted right of your husband. We later learned that you're working on a treaty.
Yeah.
Do you think your wife got a bad rap?
Well, the outright dishonesty of things. For example, the thing that she mentioned on the China that was ordered. And she was accused over and over again of spending the taxpayers' money on this very expensive set. Now, I have to tell you that the China for the White House has to be able to provide for about 120 people. We had multiple sets of China. You couldn't serve one. These people put together and had that set created and donated it.
I accepted the donation because the White House needed China very, very badly. And the first person, I'll never forget it, to come to my defense when all this brouhaha was going on was Margaret Truman. And she said she's absolutely right. She needed it.
If we didn't have the Reagan-China, we couldn't have a state dinner, for example.
She got knocked for that.
She did. She was criticized. And I think that's the other part of it, is that no matter what you do or try to do in this position, you're going to disappoint some people. You're going to be subjected to criticism. And so I believe that what we would tell any successor is that you just have to find your own way. And here are some perhaps helpful hints about how to maybe make it a little easier than it would be otherwise.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dan Rather with CBS News. President, are you running for something? No, sir, Mr. President, are you?
Did you hate Dan Rather when he stood up?
Oh, no. As far as Dan Rather and my other critics in the media, and I have a number of them, I realized that their attitude toward me was due to the fact that they simply disagreed with me. I was a conservative. They were liberal.
But did you take it that way personally?
No, I did not take it personally.
You
that's
did
why.
not?
That's why I continued to attend the gridiron dinners and the dinners of the press club and all the rest.
Well,
and
how
so
about
forth.
stories, though, of running people's tax audits, getting even, that kind of concept, which has been portrayed through the years that Richard Nixon was a guy who took it back out on
there were never any tax audits of reporters. Personally, my relations with media people are good. I realize that we just simply have different agendas. We march to different drummers.
President Ford made an unconventional arrival in Salzburg. It was raining as he and Mrs. Ford came down the steps leading from Air Force One. The president caught a heel and fell.
Mr. Chancellor, Mrs. Kreisky, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your gracious welcome to Salzburg, and I'm sorry that I tumbled in.
They had fun with you on bumbling, falling down. Did that bother you, or did you take it good-naturedly?
I tried to take it good-naturedly, at least as far as the public was concerned, because if you react otherwise, it just aggravates the problem and makes it worse.
What about personally?
In a subjective sense, you know, I had a fairly good record in athletics at the University of Michigan. Not quite, but anyhow, and I love to ski, and I got to ski fairly well. So I subjectively resented the implications that I couldn't keep my balance. But when you're in public office, you have to expect criticism from the press, from your opponents, from everybody else, and you have to live with it.
Do you think there's a bias?
Oh, yeah.
You do?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe both sides.
Maybe both sides. You think the press gets up in the morning and said, let's hit George Bush today?
Oh, sure.
Well, and I think some get up in the morning and say, let's be against anything that isn't way.
Some get up and say, we like the Bushes. Let's see what we can do.
When the polls are bad, doesn't that affect you emotionally?
No.
Doesn't it hurt to say, more people don't like what I'm doing than like what I'm doing?
Mm-mm. Let me say something about polls. If you have a president who worries about polls, it means you could have a president who makes decisions based upon the polls. You cannot achieve big goals and accomplish hard things if you're worried about opinion polls. The president that chases the opinion poll is the president that will have failed policy, in my judgment. I like to tell people I would rather be, when history looks back, I'd rather be judged as solving problems and being correct rather than being popular.
But wouldn't you rather be popular?
Not right, look, I mean, you know.
I mean, we all want to be
Well,
liked.
you're a guy who relies on ratings. I guess no wonder you're asking about the popularity question. Members of the White House Correspondents Association, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, here I am.
Do those pundits in general, Bob, do they get at you? You ever get mad?
No, but the truth is, I never watch them. I never watch the Sunday talk shows.
You don't watch Sunday morning?
Never. And if I did, I mean, what good would that do me? I mean, when...
Does it make you mad?
Yeah. Well, if I read a column, like an op-ed column, of someone who says, I think the Clinton administration's policy is all wet on this for these reasons, I'll read that. Because Benjamin Franklin said, you know, our critics are our friends. They show us our faults. But, you know, I cannot, you can't afford to be angry as president. If you're angry all the time over things people say about you, you can be angry about what happens to the American people. But if you're angry about what happens to you, then you're wasting a lot of time and emotional energy that belongs to the American people. And you're not going to make good decisions.
As Eleanor Roosevelt, who's one of my great heroines, said, you know, you just grow as thick a skin as you possibly can, and you try to take criticism seriously, but not personally. But sometimes that's difficult, especially for people who have had a whole life and a whole career where they have been lauded and successful. All of a sudden, to get into this arena where the rules really are different than they are anywhere else, and to be criticized for the first time, I think unless you've had some getting used to it, it could be devastating.
The criticism of our president can become most intense when they're called upon to function as commander-in-chief. Every decision they make in that capacity is of intense interest to the entire world and affects people's lives. There are certain moments in that capacity that are very personal, very private, and very painful.
A president gets to do this, but what is it like to do it, to send men to die? What is it?
Being president during a war is difficult. It is difficult to write the letters. It is difficult. I used to make Christmas telephone calls to the next of kin. It is difficult to present medals to the survivors of those who've been killed, including Congressional Medal of Honor winners. It's difficult to talk to the people the wives and children and loved ones of POWs.
Toughest thing about that job, risking lives?
Well, I think that's one of the things that, of course, bothers you the most.
I mean, you're pressing a button.
Yes. And, man, that's the greatest tragedy that happens to you, as I had it happen to me. With, for example, the terrorist act that killed 241 Marines in Lebanon. That was a great tragedy, and I tried to reach the families, the men who were lost and all, and it's the one thing that you just suffer the most.
There was no decision, domestic or foreign, that came as close to when you send somebody else's son or daughter these days into combat. It happened to me twice, Panama and, of course, Desert Storm. But I felt it. I felt this, even 50, 60,
you have
so
to
70
feel
years later.
100%.
You have to know you have to be convinced you're doing the right thing.
I'll never forget the day that we launched the war. And at my heart of hearts, I know that diplomacy had failed. The last option of a president ought to be to commit troops. Lars right, it is a very serious decision.
There's war eruptions in Iraq, and it seems never-ending. What does it do to you?
It's painful to know that a young American has lost his or her life in combat. It's painful because I know how broken-hearted their loved ones are. We have met with their loved ones a lot.
Oh, you have?
You bet.
Because we don't see any stories.
Well, you shouldn't. These are private moments. These aren't moments to be publicized. These are moments between me and Laura and their families. And I assure them, when I meet with them, that their loved one will not have died in vain. In other words, we will complete our mission, which is a free Iraq, and we will. And of course, it's difficult right now, but eventually, and that's because there are people there who cannot stand the thought of a free society emerging in the heart of the Middle East.
Each of the presidents and their families have had to face personal tragedies, and they were remarkably forthright in discussing it on our show.
It's easy to handle victory.
That's right.
Victory isn't hard to handle. There is no greater loss, though, than the loss of a child. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
And you lost a child.
That's right. George and I did. And
she was, what, 4?
Almost 4, and beautiful and loving.
Larry, I couldn't read that letter.
I'll read parts of it. This is a letter to his mother after wanting to have another daughter. Their daughter, Robin, had died of leukemia in 1953 at age 3. The letter was found among his mother's things after she died. We need a legitimate Christmas angel, one who doesn't have cuffs beneath the dress. We need someone to cry when I get mad, not argue. We need a little one who can kiss without leaving egg or jam or gum. We need a girl. We had one once. She'd fight and cry and play and make her way just like the rest. But there was about her a certain softness. She was patient. Her hugs were just a little less wiggly. Like them, she'd climb in to sleep with me, but somehow she'd fit. She didn't boot and flip and wake me up with pug nose and mischievous eyes, a challenging quarter-inch from my sleeping face. No, she'd stand beside our bed till I felt her there. Silently and comfortable, she'd put those precious, fragrant locks against my chest and fall asleep. Her peace made me feel strong and so very important. My daddy had a caress. My daddy had a caress, a certain ownership which touched a slightly different spot than the hi, Dad I loved so much.
but she is still with us. We need her, and yet we have her. We can't touch her, and yet we can feel her. We hope she'll stay in our house for a long, long time. Love, Pop. How were you able to write that?
Better than I could read it. We're very emotional in our family, and this was a long time ago. I've gotten over being a sissy about it, but it's very personal, and we hurt. But now we have, you know, a lot of families, Larry, when they have
loss.
Yeah, loss, they go apart. And ours, I think, was closer together.
Just one personal note, if I might. I just returned from the hospital where I saw Betty as she came from the operating room. Dr. Lukash has assured me that she came through the operation all right.
Was that difficult for you, living with the breast cancer?
Not at all. Not at all. It was
had no macho problems, as many men seem to face sometimes, what we hear about.
Well, I can say to any husband, don't be handicapped by being so limited in your affection and love for your wife that you worry about that.
Did you ever say to yourself, I'm an alcoholic?
I finally did, yes.
What led to doing that?
The intervention with my family. And it was an intervention where they confronted me and told me that I had disappointed them. I was, you know, at a point where I was not really as aware of what was going on as I normally was.
Her problem was a combination of prescribed medication by doctors in the White House and elsewhere, plus a few martinis or a bourbon and water during the afternoon.
And as an enabler, you said it's okay, right?
Yes. I think I worried about it, but I didn't see that it in any way whatsoever prevented Betty from carrying out her duties as First Lady.
You're talking about the depression I had. I really, it was
What's
my
depression
sister.
like?
Awful. It's painful, and it really physically hurts.
It's been described that as, no news is good news, that nothing can please you when you're in it.
Well, it wasn't maybe quite that bad. I mean, I faked beautifully.
How did you lick it?
I don't know. But George just held me. And he would suggest, you know, why don't you go to a doctor? And then I'd think, he thinks I'm crazy. I only cried at night when I could just keep him awake. And, I mean, it was terrible. But having said that, I was the right age, menopause. My children were gone for the first time. It was a job I couldn't share, and we'd had such fun in China and the UN, and I loved all that being part of his life, and the Republican National Committee. And all of a sudden, all that sort of, but it was really the physical thing. And a doctor could have helped me, and I was too stupid to go.
If you are faced with something now, and you've helped so many people by getting the tragic way that someone has to have affected by someone for us to be focused on it, when did you first notice?
I didn't.
You never noticed the Alzheimer's coming on?
No. We went to Mayo's in August that year.
Was there the normal memory slippages that older people have?
Well, yes.
You know, I forgot his name.
You forget names. I forget names.
Forgot we had lunch today.
So no, I didn't notice anything.
What was it like for him to write that letter?
He went into the library, and I was with him, and he just sat down at the table and wrote it.
So he just sat down and wrote that letter to the public?
Mm-hmm.
Because he knew what was coming. So, as they say, what Hemingway says, class is grace under pressure. He had that.
He sure had.
Did he express fears to you?
No.
He didn't say,
no,
this is going to be terrible? Or
no, well, all he said, which is in the letter, that he knew it would be hard on me, and that he hoped that with people's support and faith that I'd get through it, and he was sorry to put me in this position.
What do you do with frustration? Because you must have that. It must be frustrating
when you're with someone who's not cognitive?
Well, you just learn to live with it. I mean, what is there to do?
Well, some people, there are hospitals that specialize in just treating Alzheimer patients. You would never do that.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Never. Never. No, no. He's going to stay at home.
We learn each day a different way to deal with the incredible pain and loneliness of this disease. And I'm struck by the lessons it teaches each of us as we try to find the words of comfort to the questions of why. Why, Ronnie? Why me? Why now, when we were supposed to have this wonderful twilight time together? I found that even though the person I loved and have loved for 44 years is slipping away, my love for him grows. As he changes, if I stop asking why and simply love, I too grow.
Let us give thanks today for a life that achieved so much for all of God's children.
As his vice president for 8 years, I learned more from Ronald Reagan than from anyone I encountered in all my years of public life. I learned kindness. We all did. I also learned courage.
In the end, through his belief in our country and his love for our country, he became an enduring symbol of our country. May God bless Ronald Reagan and the country he loved.
We all need God's sure guidance. With it, nothing can stop the United States of America. Thank you.
He became an unelected president in a time of unprecedented American turmoil, calming the country after a devastating political crisis. Tonight, we'll remember the 38th President of the United States, Gerald R. Ford, on a very special Larry King Live. I had the great pleasure of interviewing the president on this program many times, and many personal moments with him as well. I had the honor of being asked to emcee a dinner that honored Betty Ford, attended by all the first ladies. But one particular night stands out in my memory. President Clinton and President Ford were both being honored at a special dinner honoring fathers and families in the United States. The presidents each were selected their own person to introduce them. President Clinton had Elizabeth Taylor, and President Ford asked for me, and I was really honored. In fact, my wife, Shawn, was his dinner companion that night. I introduced the president. He got up, and he followed Clinton. That's a tough act to follow. And you may find this hard to believe because President Ford was not an eloquent speaker. He outdid President Clinton that night by a mile. What he spoke about was being raised by a stepfather. President Ford was born with the name Gerald King, but his mother married a gentleman named Mr. Ford, and they got so close that he dropped the name King and took the name Ford, and forever treasured growing up with a great stepfather. When his natural father, Mr. King, tried to meet him later in life, he refused, just out of loyalty to his father, Mr. Ford. It was a speech I will never forget. Understandably, all presidents are concerned with how history will view them and what will define their legacies, and each of them had his own view on what he thought was his greatest achievement. In President Reagan's case, it was the fall of communism.
Do you feel a personal sense of accomplishment?
Well, I think that perhaps I had something to do with it because I believe, number one, that in seeking peace with the Soviet Union, it could only be done through strength, not just through words or pleading. And I also believed in the necessity of being frank about how I looked at them and their expansionism and so forth and the things that they were doing and had done here in our own country. And that's why I use some terms like calling them the evil empire and things of that kind.
You think that all paid off?
I think it did. I said to him that here it was a very unique situation. Here probably were the only two men in the world that could start World War III or maybe bring about peace. And I said that I knew we were going to talk about could we reduce arms and weapons. But I said, I have to remember that we don't mistrust each other because we're armed. We're armed because we mistrust each other. So maybe in as much as talking of reducing arms, maybe we should see if we couldn't find out ways to reduce the causes of the mistrust between us.
As you reflect back on that whole episode, the Vietnam War and everything, do you ever think maybe we should never have gone there in the first place? That Eisenhower was wrong to send the first advisor?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you could say that Eisenhower was wrong to send the first advisor. Some say that. And others say that Kennedy was wrong to send in the first 15,000 combat troops and suffer the first casualties, and that Johnson was wrong in escalating it to 550,000, and that I was wrong for not just washing my hands of it and blame the whole thing on Kennedy and Johnson, who'd sent in Americans for the first time.
You could have walked away.
I could have walked away, and many of my advisors agreed that I should, but it would have been wrong to do so.
Why?
It would have been wrong to do so because if Vietnam at that time had been overrun by the North Vietnamese, there's no question but that communist tide would have rolled through the balance of Southeast Asia, Indonesia and the rest. Now, some say that wasn't going to happen. Believe me, it would have happened. We at least stopped it there.
Henry Kissinger said about Gerald Ford, he was called after the Vietnam War and Watergate to heal the most severe national division since the Civil War. Did you see yourself as having to heal this country?
That was my prime objective as the occupant of the Oval Office. You can remember, as I do, the turbulence and the turmoil that existed because of the Watergate scandal, the problems of the tragic war in Vietnam. Families were torn apart, the communities were disrupted, you had riots and all the other things. It was a terrible time in this country, and it was my principal responsibility to restore integrity in the White House and to bring about healing in the country.
What was ending that war like for you?
Well, to sit in the Oval Office, Larry, and see those people from the roof of the U.S. Embassy in Saigon taking helicopters, and to know that we were being literally kicked out of Vietnam by the North Vietnamese, that was a sad experience for any president to see us lose as we did.
25 years ago, which seems like ancient history to some, I met with two courageous leaders, Begin and Sadat, and we negotiated a framework for peace, which was applicable to the Palestinians and to all Israel's neighbors. And then 6 months later, we negotiated a peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. Very difficult, just as difficult then as it is now.
Still in place.
Every word is still being honored of that peace treaty. And this followed 4 major wars between Israel and Egypt in just 25 years. There was a deep sense of hatred and resentment because leaders on both sides had their own children and acquaintances killed in the wars. So it was equally as difficult then as now. But what we tried to demonstrate was not only that peace was possible, and that's still a message that that is extant. It hasn't faded away. But that good faith negotiations with the United States taking a balanced and equal position between Israel and Egypt is a crucial factor.
When I first came in here, we got things done. We got a great child care bill. We got the best environmental legislation you've ever seen, that Clean Air Act. We did 2 civil rights pieces of legislation, including the historic Americans for Disability Act that says to every disabled person, look, we're going to give you a shot at the American dream. We got things done.
I feel very good about what's happened these last 6 years. We've done a lot of other things as well, and we've been able to advance the cause of peace in Northern Ireland, the Middle East, the Balkans.
Biggest disappointment?
I don't know what the biggest disappointment is. You know, I'm sorry we were not able to have more progress in health care, but we may have some this year. The main thing is I feel this enormous gratitude because I think our country is ending this century on such a high note. And I really do think we've built our bridge to the 21st century.
Do you ever feel that it's all coming in around you?
No, I don't. I view this
as... Because it's been said no president has had to face, maybe with the exception of Roosevelt with depression in World War II, what you faced at the same time, domestically and...
No, that's not how I look at life. I look at life as a series of opportunities to make this world a better place. One reason there's problems is because we've confronted them. In other words, the status quo was unacceptable to me, and therefore it's important to deal with problems before they become acute.
As we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens, I can hear you. I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Fear another 9/11?
Do I? Yes, I do. I do.
You think we're safe?
I think we're safer, but I'm worried about an enemy that wants to hit us again, and I'm comforted by the fact there's a lot of people working hard on the issue.
Have we stopped a lot? Have there been things that we don't hear about that have been stopped?
We've disrupted plots, and not only here but elsewhere.
Can we get bin Laden?
Yeah, we'll get him. We're just a matter of persistence and patience. Every day I think about this.
About getting him?
Every day. Well, every day I think about Al Qaeda. Every day I think about protecting this country. I mean, every day.
You've always been fascinated with history. How do you think it's going to deal with you?
Well, you have 2 different concepts here. How historians deal with you and how history in the broadest sense. Historians will probably not deal with me too well because generally they are on the left, and I happen to be on the right. Not the far right, but on the right. As far as history generally is concerned, maybe 50 years from now, my children, grandchildren, your children and grandchildren down the line, will see it in a more balanced light. They probably will put more emphasis on what has happened in the relations between the United States and China. What would have happened if we hadn't have gone, and that a country with 1 billion people, a military superpower, an economic superpower, was alienated from the United States. They will also remember what happened on the Watergate issue, but they will tend to focus more on the positive than the negative, I would hope. Historians will not, most historians.
But history will.
But people, in the broadest sense, I think, will.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
You can't tell me you figured that would happen.
Well, I meant what I said when I said tear it down. You know, it was such a, how would we feel if you wanted to put a wall down the Mississippi River from Canada to the Gulf.
The liking of Gorbachev, was that a real sense of affection? Did you like him?
Yes, I'll have to tell you that, as you know, he was the fourth. There were 3 leaders before him of the Soviet Union, and I didn't have much to do with them. They kept dying on me. But he was totally different than any Russian leader that I had met before. And I have to say, I think that there was a kind of a chemistry there that's set up. But again, knowing the difference between our two systems, I'm not a linguist, but I learned one little Russian phrase, and I used it so often that he used to clap his hands over his ears.
The maxim is, doverяй, no proverяй. Trust but verify.
Но значение этого...
На каждой встрече вы это повторяете.
You repeat that at every meeting.
Ronnie had said to him, why don't you and I go down to the boathouse, sit and talk? And everybody thought, oh, no, don't do that. Well, of course, when they left, much later, and everybody, not everybody, but a few people said, I think we should go down there and break it up. And I think it was George Shultz who said, if you do that, you don't deserve to have the job that you have. And when they came out, they had arranged for 2 more summits.
Do you miss Washington?
I miss a lot of the people there. I suppose maybe I might have more missed it if I had known from the very beginning that there was a limit due to that constitutional amendment that was put through, so that you knew that at a time certain you were to leave. And I shall always have a warm feeling in my heart for that Marine pilot. We got on Marine One, that had been the presidential helicopter, to go out to the air base and take off for California. Well, the pilot circled at a very low level Washington there, and then at the lowest point of altitude, he circled the White House. And I said, look, honey, there's our little shack down there.
It's been a privilege to talk with some of the world's most important leaders. We often spoke during times of international crisis. But what we've enjoyed most is getting to know the person behind the title.
I mean, most little girls don't grow up to be prime minister. We have yet to have a little girl grow up to be president. When did you know you were different?
That's a strange question to ask, and for a moment I have to think. I was very much aware from quite an early age, being the youngest in the family, I much preferred the company of my elders to the company of my contemporaries. I was much more interested in the things they were talking about, because these were the 30s, and these were interesting times.
Well, that's
there
a
were times
time
of
to
great
feel,
unemployment.
and you were a very young lady. You must have felt different. Why aren't I hanging around with my 12-year-old friends? Why do I want to be with my 22-year-old aunt?
I enjoyed the conversation and the company of older people very much.
Well, how old were you when you said, I'm going to run for office?
Oh, I was really at university when I expressed the wish to become a member of Parliament. And it wasn't I who really triggered that expression. We were just sitting around the kitchen table with a number of friends after a dance one evening, and we were talking about politics. Of course, I was often talking about politics. And all of a sudden, one of my companions said, "You want to be an MP, don't you?" And it crystallized it for me, just like that. And I said, yes, but I couldn't afford it. MPs weren't paid very much in those days.
So you ran when?
When they were paid enough.
What about this job surprises you the most?
I think just the sheer relentless pressure of decision-making. But the thing that takes you aback most as a politician when you become Prime Minister or the leader of your country is that I'd certainly, even before the election, I used to wander down the street. I never had detectives with me. I led a very easy, normal life. Lots of people recognized you, but you could, things were normal, and it was just like living like other people. And suddenly, in our system, you win the election on the 1st of May, 2nd of May you're running the country, and everything changes, and it takes a bit of getting used to.
What made you able to turn a place that didn't have freedom into freedom? What did it to you?
Well, life changed us. Efforts, attempts to reform the country, to reform our society, were made several times after Stalin's death, because what we inherited after Stalin, a totalitarian regime, repressions, the domination of one party, of one ideology, the suppression of freedom, that did not give our society, our country, enough fresh air, and therefore the country was suffocating and it needed second wind. And therefore every people who were concerned about our country tried to do something. They wanted to try some reforms. Khrushchev tried it, Kosygin tried an economic reform, but all of those were defeated because the nomenclatura always acted in a way to prevent reforms from succeeding.
But you decided to do what they didn't do. You took them on. You didn't have to take them on. You could have lived the life of a typical Soviet president. Why did you take them on?
Well, no. This, I think, would be someone other than Gorbachev if I did not take them on. My experience, my convictions, my education, my pain and my feeling about my country and my people, all of this was growing on me, and over the years I became angry. I became unhappy about what was happening in the country, how we were treating our people, our citizens. And for me, initially it was some unhappiness, but then it became really an opinion, a view.
You tell me, what happened with the submarine?
It sunk.
Did you want to be king?
No.
Didn't want to be king?
It's not a job that one tries to go for. I felt that I wanted to be able to serve my father and my family. I had my career staked out in the armed forces. This is something that he wanted.
You were military, right?
Military all my life, about 20 years, until the day His Majesty passed away. I knew my future. I had carved a very comfortable niche, so to speak.
Beautiful wife, children, nice house, family.
A great career. I was really enjoying myself, and I knew that I would serve His Majesty, and I knew that I'd play a big role in the future of Jordan. But in the back of my mind, it's not a job that one wants.
Step-parenting is never easy at any age, and you're his stepmother. Do you get along?
Yes, we have over 21 years.
You knew him when he was a teenager?
I knew him when he was a teenager, and I cared very much for him and tried to be as sensitive to his position, always a very challenging one, and to be supportive of all that he hoped to contribute and to accomplish. And yes, we went through all sorts of phases of his life together and that of his brothers and sisters, and we all learned a lot. But no, he is like a son.
Do you worry for yourself? Threats, stories of Palestinians angered?
When it stopped all what we are mentioning, the moment I started this road, I know that it is not an easy march. For your information, I lost many of my colleagues, many of my friends, many of my brothers, martyrs. Oh.
Dead over the years?
Yes. And I was supposed to be one of them.
You were a revolutionary. Were you a terrorist? Did you ever commit acts of aggression, violence?
Well, terrorism depends on...
Who wins?
That's right. I was called a terrorist yesterday, but then I came out of jail. Many people embraced me, including my enemies. And that is what I normally tell other people who say those who are struggling for liberation in their country are terrorists. I tell them that I was also a terrorist yesterday, but today I'm admired by the very people who said I was one.
Did you ever explain to yourself apartheid? I mean, did you ever understand it, why people were held in mass slavery in a sense?
Well, it's difficult to understand such a phenomenon. But I take it that in a country like South Africa, where the overwhelming majority of the population was black, and the ruling party merely about 14% of the population, they regarded it as the best way to protect white supremacy, to cut us out completely from all the rights of citizenship.
And how did you even explain that to yourselves?
Well, we did not explain it. We just said
it's wrong.
It's wrong, and racism is a characteristic feature of South Africa. We must fight it to the death.
Was it difficult to open doors to the United States? Because you had to be raised with feelings about the United States like we were raised with feelings about the Soviets. Was that hard to open that door?
Очень трудно. Very difficult. When President Reagan and I first began to talk, we were together just like you and I today, and President Reagan began to accuse me, of human rights violations. He said, you have no democracy. He said, you need to make these changes in foreign policies and these changes, etc., etc. And my answer when our dialogue began to go that way was, Mr. President, you are not a prosecutor and I'm not an accused. Let us not lecture each other. We represent big countries. Let us speak as equals. I think that then we will be able to find keys to any problem. So it was difficult, but still it became possible. Without changes in Soviet-American relations, nothing would have changed in the world.
How would you like history to judge you? What should it say?
Well, this is for history. This is history's privilege. History is a capricious lady, but I hope that it will judge me fairly.
She is a leader with vision and the courage to stay the course until the battles are won. And on occasion, she has borne the added burden of heavy criticism incurred on America's behalf. I've been fortunate over these 8 years, and for several years before that, to enjoy such a close professional and personal rapport and a genuine friendship with Margaret Thatcher.
What's your picture of him?
It was just very providential that he and I were in power together. He had the same beliefs as I did. He had something else. He had the most marvelous voice and communication talents. And then he could get everything across, not only what he wanted to do, but the reason why. And also we had something else in common. He never deflected from his purpose. He kept straight on towards his goal, and so did I.
But you can have same opinions and same goals, but that don't mean you have to like someone. And the two of you had genuine affection, correct?
Yes, indeed.
There was affection.
Yes, we just got on very easy together. Sometimes, the chemistry works and you just click into action with her. But I knew him before I was Prime Minister and also before he was President.
Do you believe there is a higher power?
Я верю в человека.
I believe in human being.
Я верю в
I believe
его добрые помыслы.
In his good
Я верю
intentions.
в то,
I believe
что все мы
in the fact that
пришли
all of
для того,
us
чтобы творить
have
добро.
come to this world to
И
do
если мы
good.
будем это делать,
And
и
if we
будем
do
делать
so,
это вместе,
and if we do
то у
so
нас ждет
together,
успех. И
then
в
success is
отношениях
awaiting
между
for us,
собой,
and both with regards to our relations as
Но
people
самое
to
главное,
people
что мы добьемся,
or interstate relations.
таким образом самого
And
главного.
most
Мы
important, we'll
добьемся,
achieve the
комфорта в
ultimate
собственной
goal, comfort in our own heart.
Do you pray
And if you pray, who do you pray to?
Yes, we Buddhists pray to Buddha. That means to God, higher being.
Is Buddha but God?
The Buddha, the origin of Buddha, is just ourselves, just like ourselves.
He was a man.
Yes, ordinary, a man or ascended being is ordinary. Then through his or her own practice, they eventually enlightened. That we call Buddha. So we can consider them as a higher being. So they have extra sort of energy. And we can appeal to them in the form of prayer.
But your basic concept is belief in self.
That's right.
And love for others.
That's right.
Is it a burden, your role?
No. You see, my the role in the Tibetan freedom struggle, I believe this is not just mere political sort of issue. I believe, firstly, this is a national issue of also the Tibetan nation's survival, struggle for survival. And that is very much connected with Buddhist culture and Buddhist spirituality. So therefore, my participate in this struggle, I consider part of my spiritual practice.
But you have paid a price in this struggle. You personally have paid a heavy price, but you don't consider it a burden.
Of course, after all, life is not that much easy all the time. So the purpose of life is something useful, something benefit for others.
I've been with CNN since 1985. In those years, many events of universal significance have taken place. In this next collection, we'll tell a number of stories that are sad, tearful, and gut-wrenching. But they also show how this country and the people of this country can rebound from disasters, both natural and man-made. For the most part, it shows how the common man is capable of some very uncommon acts of courage and valor. At CNN, when we come to work in the morning, we have no way of knowing what the world has in store for us. And that was never more true than on September 11th, 2001, when our entire perception of the world changed in the blink of an eye.
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
Mayor, what's the situation right now?
The situation is that two airplanes have attacked apparently. Can't go to sleep. Why? You should not go to sleep. All right, well then let's go north then.
Tonight, America under attack. Horrible images as terrorists strike against symbols of wealth and power. The casualty count unknown, the damage unspeakable. What early assessment do you have?
Right now, it's a mess. It's like Beirut down there. I mean, it's really a mess.
We do know, however, that 200 firemen and 78 policemen are missing, right?
We do know that numbers of police and fire are missing, and it's a tribute to their heroism, that they went down there and risked their lives to protect others and try to save other lives. And, you know, Larry, this is a very dark day for America.
It was terror, sheer terror. Bodies were falling out of the sky. They were jumping off the 105th floor, and they were landing all over the street and the sidewalk. There was fear in everybody's eyes.
And what were you doing?
I was trying to avoid looking up and watching it, Mr. King. It was horrible. I saw dozens of people jumping.
There's people up on the 8th floor just waving.
What did you see? Did any people jump?
I saw 15 to 20 people jump.
So you were an eyewitness to death. You were an eyewitness to people jumping.
It was the saddest thing I've ever saw in my life.
It is hard even to contemplate the utter carnage and terror which has engulfed so many innocent people.
It is with enormous emotion that France has just learned of these monstrous attacks. There is no other word that have struck the United States of America.
God help them, God help them, God help them.
At this most difficult hour, all Israelis stand as one with the American people.
As the building burned, some of those trapped inside managed to call home. Here's Kenneth Van Auken.
I love you. I'm in the World Trade Center. The building was hit by something. I don't know if I'm going to get out, but I love you very much. I hope I'll see you later. Bye.
Boy, Laura, what must it be like to hear that?
It was just horrible. It was really just horrible. I could hear the terror in his voice, and he was trying to sound like he was calm for us, but you could hear the chaos in the background and the terror in his voice.
Kenneth Van Auken was an employee of Cantor Fitzgerald, and so were about 700 others who died when the Twin Towers collapsed. The company CEO, Howard Lutnick, known for being a tough businessman, was devastated.
We've decided that what we're going to do is we're going to give 25% of the profits of the company to the families of the victims to try to take care of them so they stay part of our family and that we can try to take care of them with our company. Because, you see, they call me and they say, how come you can't pay my salary? Why can't you pay my husband's salary? Other companies pay their salary. Why can't you? But you see, I lost everybody in the company, so I can't pay their salaries. So they think we're doing something wrong. I can't pay their salaries. I don't have any money to pay their salaries.
United Flight 93 was on its way to Washington when it crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. No one knows the target, but the mission seemed clear: death and destruction. The courage shown by the passengers on that flight defies description. Todd Beamer placed a call before the heroes decided to roll.
He informed the operator that he knew he was not going to make it out of this. His next response was to ask her to say the Lord's Prayer with him, and then he asked Jesus to help him, and once he got that guidance, he asked her to contact me, gave her my name and phone number and my children's names, and to tell us how much he loved us. And then once he had all that business squared away, he did what Todd would normally do, and he took some action. And what he did was he told the operator that he and some other people on the flight were deciding to jump on the hijacker with the bomb strapped around his waist. And the last thing the operator heard Todd say at 10 a.m., 15 minutes into the call, was, "Are you ready? Let's roll."
Barbara Olson was a frequent guest on Larry King Live. She was on American Airlines Flight 77 that left Dulles bound for Los Angeles and crashed into the Pentagon. Now, before she went to the airport on September 11th, Barbara left her husband Ted something very special, and he found it that night.
There was a note that Barbara had written to me on the pillow saying, I love you. When you read this, I will be thinking of you, and I will be back Friday. It were a few more words than that, but I just, that was extraordinarily special and very much like Barbara, and I'm grateful that she did that.
Back in New York, the hunt for the missing began.
I'm down here for the long term, Larry. I'm going to find my daughter, no matter what it takes, no matter what I have to do. There's only one thing in my life right now, and that's to bring her home.
This was the North Tower. That was the South Tower. It's just been an unbelievable 3 weeks. You can see that we've moved into an awful lot of heavy construction.
The schedule that we have is overwhelming because on Sunday we went to 2 funerals, and then Monday I had to work, Tuesday I had to work, Wednesday we're here. Tomorrow we have another funeral to go upstate to, and then tomorrow night I have to go back to work, and Friday night I have to go back to work. And that's
when
all
you
we
say
do.
Night, you work what hour, all night?
Yes, from 6 p.m. to 9 a.m. So it seems to be that all we do is work and go to funerals, and then back to work, back to funerals.
How many days after was a live person found? 2?
No, nobody.
Was anyone ever found?
We didn't find anybody after. Right that day, there was some people pulled out, but not
Like
after
in the afternoon?
Yeah, after that, there was nobody.
I guess we were all just waiting to die when it began. Some of our brothers that were in the same stairwell with us that are now missing, we passed them or they passed us in the stairwell.
We're in the heart of New York City at 47th Street and 8th Avenue. We're at the home of Engine 54, Ladder 4, Battalion 9 of the New York City Fire Department. This firehouse lost all 15 men on duty on the day of Ground Zero, September 11th, 2001. When did you find out about the deaths of your buddies?
We had thought during the day that we had heard a report that the guys from 54 were somewhere. And when we came back here, Chief Mayor told me, no, everybody's gone. And I just started crying like a baby.
Oh, Firefighter Turner, what's that picture?
This is a picture of 54 Engine responding to the World Trade Centers on 9/11.
Who took the picture?
I don't know his name.
I know this is hard for you. Did he come here and give it much later?
Yeah, about.
Next, we go to Washington, D.C., where James Baker, the former Secretary of State, is standing by. Is this a failure on the part of American policy?
I don't think it's a failure on the part of American policy, Larry. I think that there probably were perhaps some lapses in security.
Were you surprised that whoever did this was able to commandeer these aircraft?
Not
able
really.
to fly them?
Not really. Remember, we have no sky marshals on the aircraft, so we have no one armed on aircraft randomly to prevent this from happening. The door that separates the cockpit from the rest of the airplane is really just a symbol of security. It's not real security.
Did the scenario of September 11th ever come up in your years of discussion? Was it ever said, you know, what if they ever take a plane and go into a building?
It may have happened. I mean, there may have been some people who had war-gamed that out, but I had not war-gamed it out. And it was a shock to all of us.
No one predicted this. No one anticipated or had advance warning of this attack.
We have always known this could happen. We've warned about it. We've talked about it.
Were you shocked?
Shocked, but not surprised.
Not surprised?
Not surprised, no.
You have to really be amazed, at least I'm amazed, at the degree of success. 4 airplanes were hijacked. 75%, 3 out of the 4, found their targets.
It was a very well-executed, well-planned, extremely sophisticated operation. Very, very difficult to intercept unless you had intelligence that it was going to happen, and you could have found the people who were planning such a thing.
Land of the free, and home of the brave. Right? Isn't that what it says? Land of the free, home of the brave. So let's be brave. Let's get out there and do the things that we're supposed to do. These people didn't die so that we would let terrorists control our lives.
It is my belief that we remain in a situation where there is a significant threat of additional terrorist activity in the United States.
The other day, when you talked about fear of another attack, do you think maybe you set people off a little?
Well, I certainly didn't intend to, but I think it would be misleading if we were to suggest that there was no real possibility that we would have a reoccurrence.
What if it's bin Laden? Well, if it is bin Laden,
Well,
what do? You go into Afghanistan, you look for him, you bomb, what do you do?
I don't think America can be a paper tiger in this instance. This was a major attack.
If they could have killed not 6,000 innocent people, but 60,000 or even 600,000, they would.
Mr. President, if bin Laden does not turn himself in, as has been asked by the people in Pakistan through the United States, do you expect the United States to take military action in Afghanistan?
To attack a country because of some individuals, you are going to kill innocent people. We have to be very careful with that.
For our world, we need to stop. Just stop. Stop for a moment before anybody says or does anything that may hurt anyone else.
You know, when people ask us why we are pursuing this action in Afghanistan and this action against terrorism, I say just go back to what happened on the 11th of September. Remember how we felt, remember what we thought about it, remember the grief and the agony of people, and then realize that these people would do it again and worse if they could.
We need to notice. Just notice. Notice for a moment before the future slips away into ashes and dust of humility.
It has been a great, of course, national event that has gripped all of our hearts, all of our souls, all of our thinking.
September 11th, 2001. We managed to live through and survive this man-made disaster, but 4 years later, we were hit with a natural disaster that also tested our resolve. In 2005, we saw more hurricanes than ever in recorded history. The nightmare scenario of a hurricane hitting New Orleans had been feared for decades, but it became a reality August 29th, 2005.
The flooding here is epic. I cannot tell you what we have seen. An entire ward of this city, the 9th ward, appears to be up to its rooftops in water. There have been bodies seen here. I haven't personally seen one, but I know others have seen. Unbelievable. I told you earlier today I didn't think this had turned out to be Armageddon. I was wrong.
Tonight, Hurricane Katrina batters New Orleans with whipping winds and massive floods, and in Mississippi, the monster storm is blamed for 3 deaths so far after turning some streets into rivers 12 feet deep. Michael Brown is director of FEMA. How bad, Michael?
Well, Larry, let me put it this way. This is a catastrophic disaster. I've just started getting reconnaissance reports from my folks in the field, and I'm anticipating now that I'm going to have to prepare for housing at least tens of thousands of victims that are going to be without homes for literally months on end.
Excuse me.
We have parishes that are totally underwater, homes that are inundated. We have pulled hundreds of people out of the waters as we speak.
Yo, are you upstairs? Back up. Back up. You have any ailments, broken bones? No. Illnesses? No. Okay.
Just amazing, a tragic scene here. Just desperately waving to get the attention of the many rescue helicopters. And they need an air force of these helicopters to pull these people off of these rooftops.
We are dealing with one of the worst natural disasters in our nation's history.
Tonight, Hurricane Katrina's death toll now said to be over 100 in Mississippi alone. And the mayor of New Orleans fears hundreds, maybe thousands, are already dead in his city. There's looting and chaos, and more than 2 million people across the sweltering Gulf Coast have no electricity, and now fears of disease and a massive health crisis, with desperate survivors wondering when help will arrive.
Anderson Cooper, what's the situation from Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, where you are?
It's not a good situation, Larry. I mean, you know, people are getting really desperate. It's been more than 48 hours now. There has been some looting in Waveland, where I was earlier today. They're finding bodies every hour. We found 6 bodies while I was there. Families who thought they could ride out the storm. Families who ended up drowning in their homes. In their living rooms, clutching onto their loved ones. And, you know, there are a lot of angry people here who I got a man pulled up to me today and said, ask the federal government, where are they? I mean, where are the troops? Where are the National Guards? There are a lot of people in need, Larry, and there are a lot of questions being asked and a lot of frustration right now, and the people are not getting the answers that they expect.
People were taken out of the water and off rooftops and left on a highway without any transportation into town. They were dying by the side of the road, elderly people who had no water, who desperately needed health care. They had nothing.
Joining us for a few moments from Baton Rouge is Michael Brown. I must tell you, Michael, throughout this first half hour of Larry King Live, all of our correspondents, other people telling our correspondents that they're frustrated, they're angry, they're mad at the government, state, federal. They're not getting enough, and they're saying, where is the help? So, where's the help?
Larry, the help is right there, and it's going to be moving in very, very rapidly. I'm going to ask the country to be patient. And I must say, this storm is much, much bigger than anyone expected. I also want to add, I understand the frustrations of those victims.
I'm tired of hearing politicians say that, you know, they understand the frustration of people down here. It's not frustration. It's not that people are frustrated. It's that people are dying. And their corpses in the street being eaten by rats. And this is the United States of America.
We want help! We want help! We want help! All these people you see here down.
I want to say to the American people, it's important to understand that this is a very profound moment in our history. And it's important for us to realize that our political leadership is not reflecting the will and the feelings of the American people.
Again, I want to thank you all for, and Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job. The FEMA director is working 24 hours.
There are a lot of people who listen to you on satellite radio, and you know, they come up to me and they tell me if I hear them one more time, you know, congratulating each other and thanking each other for all their efforts, the politicians, you know, they would like them to come down here and roll up their sleeves and get in a tent and help out with some people.
Well, FEMA says they're on the way. Let's hope it all happens quickly.
It's bad around here. People trying to eat and survive. This is, you know, trying to take care of their family.
Do you hear me, Reginald?
Yes, I'm still in the convention center.
Oh, you're still in the center. We're happy we're able to reach you. Describe the scene in there.
It's not good. It's not good at all.
Anybody die in there, Reginald?
Excuse me?
Anybody die?
We have several people to die. Matter of fact, I think we have 2 to die today, I think, if I'm not mistaken. 10 altogether.
This one is my brother, Romel. He refused to evacuate. He didn't take it serious. This is my cousin, Deshawn, and her baby, Simone. We haven't heard from them as well.
Why didn't they evacuate?
I don't know why.
We hope they contact you, Giselle. Hang tough. Sometimes there is a silver lining.
I hope so.
I was on a show showing my sister's pictures and my husband's picture too. And when I got back to the shelter, there was an anonymous phone call with a ticket saying that they located my sister. She was evacuated from the Vietnamese church in Michoud in New Orleans.
Congratulations, April. We're so happy for you. Giselle Boutte-Sparkman now joins us from the Houston Astrodome. She has now found everyone who is missing. Giselle, how did this happen?
Well, thanks to CNN and the viewers of CNN, everybody found everybody.
Giselle, what must it be like when you got them all together?
A lot of tears and hugs and kisses and more kisses and hugs and tears.
A natural disaster. What may be the worst catastrophe in U.S. history. Devastation, desperation, utter despair. But in the midst of unspeakable heartbreak, acts of heroism and flashes of hope. Tonight, responding to the crisis after Hurricane Katrina, making the difference between life and death. Good evening. This is a Larry King Live special we wish we didn't have to do, but a lot of people are in a lot of trouble, and we can't sit around hoping that somebody else will help.
This is a magnificent country. Everybody across our nation and people across the world are reaching out to people of Louisiana. These are our dark days, Larry, but we know that we're going to rebuild and restore and come back stronger. But in the meantime, I just appreciate the fact that so many people are wanting to help.
Joining us now is an old and dear friend, Celine Dion, the musical superstar. She and the director of her wonderful show, a show I've seen, Franco Dragoon, have donated, by the way, pledged $1 million to the American Red Cross.
Yes, we gave $1 million, but there's people still there, waiting to be rescued. And for me, it's not acceptable. I know there's reasons for it. I'm sorry to say I'm being rude, but I don't want to hear those reasons. You know, some people are stealing and they're making a big deal out of it. Who cares? The main thing right now, it's not the people who are stealing. It's the people who are left there and they're watching helicopters flying over their heads and they're praying.
I get so tired when I hear somebody say, oh, do you think it's worth rebuilding New Orleans, or will New Orleans ever come back? Look, it was here for hundreds of years, you might say, and this was the most devastating storm, but that doesn't mean there's going to be another one tomorrow. It means we got to fight back, recover it, be sure to have it in shape that it won't happen again. But New Orleans, you don't wipe out the heartbeat of a city like New Orleans by a tragedy, no matter how great.
That's why President Bush and I tried to get this money out here. We know that once people start doing things, then they'll think of something else to do and something else to do, and more people will come in and help. And before you know it, you'll hear all the naysayers talking about something else.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
How painful this must be for you to watch.
It's deeper than pain. You know, pain is something quantifiable or something we can understand. It's a deep, profound American tragedy.
She's one of the most compelling voices in American literature, a poet, teacher, best-selling author, activist, and we're honored to end tonight's Larry King Live with some reflections on this hurricane from Dr. Maya Angelou.
When land became water, and water began to think it was God, consuming lives here, leaving lives there, swallowing buildings, devouring cities, intoxicated with itself, power, mighty power. And the American people were tested as a result of our tumultuous history. There abides in the American psyche an idea so powerful it ennobles us and lifts us high above the problems which beset us. It can, in fact, evict fear. It can wrest despair from its lodging. Simply put, the idea is, yes, I can. I am an American, and yes, I can. I can overcome. The one-time slave says, I have proved and am proving that I can overcome slavery. The one-time slave owner says, I have proved and I am proving that I can overcome slavery. The North can say, I have proved and am still proving that I can overcome the Civil War. The South can say, I have proved and I am still proving that I can overcome the Civil War. With crime rampant in our streets, the American can say, our masses have not turned into masses of criminals. Even with blissful peace, Americans can say we have not been lulled into a contented laziness. The song that was so needed 100 years ago when it was written, so needed 50 years ago when it was used in the civil rights movement, is of great use to us these days, while we are still reeling from the onslaught of a violent hurricane. The song is, we shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome, I pray. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome. Let us all pray and work to that. I am Maya Angelou, and I am an American.
Britain's Princess Diana has been seriously injured in an automobile accident.
Occurred after midnight Paris time in a tunnel near
She's complained continually about the press and actually been forced
into As we understand
it,
Princess Diana has been taken to an area hospital. We're not being
We still have no word, no official reaction from Buckingham Palace.
The car, the front of it is totally smashed in.
Diana, the Princess of Wales, has died at the age of 36.
An untimely end for a real-life princess. The most compelling story of 1997. We're sorry it needed telling.
The world had disbelief, did you?
I was in shock. I was in shock for weeks. I still can't believe it. You know, you still sort of go to the telephone thinking, I'll ring Dutch, you know, what's she got to say about it? Or she'd think that things were very funny, or something I might do is funny, or, so, you know, there must be a joke, that, or I don't know what it is, you know.
You shared many views about royalty and the like.
Yes. But
neither of you were crazy about
it. Perhaps we're the only two people in the world that really knew, you know, and so we could talk to each other and we could laugh about it. But you can't really do that. It would be very disloyal of me to ever speak about it to anyone else.
It was just an eternal sadness. It was to share a recognition of our mortality in such a global fashion. In my experience, I've never seen it happen before. When I watched the Union Jack hoisted up over Buckingham Palace and then brought to half-mast, never happened in 1,000 years.
We'd had a very strange week, which had changed a lot in mood and tense, and towards the end, people had begun to get quite angry and fractious, but luckily, once the Queen returned to London and she made her speech, all that seemed to dissolve.
So what I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her two boys.
On behalf of your mother and sisters, I pledge that we, your blood family, will do all we can to continue the imaginative and loving way in which you are steering these two exceptional young men, so that their souls are not simply immersed by duty and tradition, but can sing openly as you planned.
I think Prince Charles is perfectly well aware of how his sons must be brought up and of the wide range of experiences which they must go through. A note of discord sounded by what was clearly an attack on the royal family, who were sitting mute opposite, unable in a sense, and certainly they would never respond, but unable to respond.
We will not allow them to suffer the anguish that used regularly to drive you to tearful despair.
I think when Spencer had made his speech, there was a deathly hush in the Abbey, and then there was a roaring cheer from the crowd outside and clapping, and that came through the Abbey, and I suspect the Abbey's never heard clapping like it.
I mean, it's an extraordinary thing that we're talking about someone who is
very unsure of her position, really, in the world's affections, largely because large elements of say, the British press were very negative about her the whole time, constantly criticising her, and it used to make her very, very sad, as I said in the speech. But I don't think she had any idea that she was of such global significance. I mean, she must have noticed how whenever she went anywhere, she lit up a room or an arena or whatever. To know she had that phenomenal popularity, which we all saw the September before last, I don't think she could have had any idea of that.
Why do you think we are so interested?
Because I think that she symbolized truth and she symbolized love. And I think Mother Teresa said the greatest disease of all is the lack of love. And I think Diana always used to go everywhere and touch and felt, and she genuinely, from the bottom of her heart, gave herself.
And this just into CNN. CNN has confirmed now that the U.S. Coast Guard is conducting a search off of the coast of New York, extending now up to Martha's Vineyard for a private aircraft that apparently has now gone overdue. The plane was reportedly headed to Martha's Vineyard. The Coast Guard is saying to CNN that on board that plane was believed to be John F. Kennedy, Jr.
America had lost yet another Kennedy. 4 years before that tragic incident, I had the pleasure of talking with John F. Kennedy, Jr. He was on to promote his new magazine, George, and to share some special memories.
Now, when you look at him, John, you look at your father and you must see him all the time. I mean, we see him everywhere. We see him in tapes and in visions and on cameras and in Democratic conventions. He's everywhere. You didn't know him, right? How do you look at him? Is he my father, a president, a great man? My family? What's the association?
I think it's complicated, and I think that you see it in a variety of ways. I mean, I understand that my father is part of the mythology of this country, and he was also a very compelling political figure. Certainly he was aware himself of the opportunities for politics to be both fun and serious, and that's one of the things that we've tried to, that mix. I mean, if there is, you know, bits and pieces of family history which go into creating something, you know, on my end, that's part of it.
That famous picture, which you must have seen 7 zillion times, the little boy. Do you remember that?
I think that what happens is that you see an image so many times that you sort of begin to believe, remember the image, but I'm not sure I really do.
But probably memories of your father are not great.
They're great, but they're not plentiful.
I was wondering, John, what aspect of your personality do you credit your mother the most for having instilled in you?
Good question.
I think that there's a sense of not worrying too much about things that you can't control and living your life.
Your mother didn't get involved in things that...
No, I think just sort of living your life and doing what you feel and where your interests take you, and certainly that was the case with this endeavor when a lot of people say that, you know, it won't work, you can't do it, or what do you know about publishing, or that's not the right thing for you to do, you should run for office. So there's a certain confidence in that.
Was she doting? I mean, would you say she was someone who...
When she needed to be,
kept
but
in touch?
I wouldn't characterize that as her... Oh, yes, absolutely kept in touch, but doting... I
mean, you know, what did you do today? Where are you tonight?
Yeah, absolutely.
Was it tough? Is it tough being a junior?
I mean, sure, I wouldn't know, I don't have a basis of comparison.
I mean, are there ever days you say, I wish my name were David?
No, I'm pretty happy with what it is. I mean, if you're asking if it's hard being me, it's...
Well, it's brought you a unique life.
Yeah, absolutely, and great opportunities and some challenges, but all in all, I feel very fortunate, so... It's not so bad.
You think
I'd recommend it.
You do. You think it's very good to be the son of a legend.
You know, I mean, it's complicated, and it makes for a rich and complicated life. But that's, I think, part of the puzzle to figure out in my life.
Some people are famous when tragedy happens. We already know who they are. But others are thrust into the limelight out of nowhere. Such was the case of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey, whose tragic death still has no satisfactory explanation or resolution. In the midst of their sorrow, JonBenet's parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, had to deal with the fact that many people believed that they killed their own daughter.
You almost immediately became suspects. Do you know why? Or the public perception of suspects?
Well,
was it because of the bathing, because of the...
No, I think the tragedy...
Way before that.
The tragedy of this investigation was it ended on December 26th. Linda Arndt, the lead detective that was there, went on national television a few months ago and said, I knew the father did it because I saw it in his eyes on the 26th. I didn't act right. I was too calm, cordial.
How did you react when she said that?
It was a bit incredulous, but it also illustrated the bias we were dealing with from the very beginning.
The police that were there the morning of the 26th, taking evidence, have a lot of tangible evidence. They did a good job at collecting evidence. We have fibers, we have DNA, we have a lot of evidence. The problem was that then they did not take the evidence to where it would lead.
Why did they think it was you?
Because the police always go after the parents. And we understood that after...
The death of a child?
Absolutely, 100%
With a ransom
of the time.
note, you go, really?
Absolutely.
Well, I think, you know, in every case, parents are always suspected initially. And at first we were aghast at that, but then we understood that we needed to be investigated.
The police
but they
say...
stopped there.
More than 3 years after JonBenet's murder, one of the original investigators on the case, Detective Steve Thomas, joined the Ramseys on the show as the accuser and the accused faced each other. It was unrehearsed, unprepared, and it just unfolded in front of my eyes.
You felt you wanted to confront this?
Absolutely, it's time.
Is it difficult for you to sit in Steve's presence?
It's not pleasant. This man has harmed us deeply. He's failed in his responsibilities as a police officer. He's failed us. He's failed JonBenet. He's failed the community of Boulder. It's not pleasant, no.
I still haven't heard the theory yet. I totally agree that whoever wrote this ransom note killed our daughter. Yes, I concur wholeheartedly.
Now, if he believes you wrote the note...
Now, let's hear, what I want to hear is, how is it exactly that you think that I killed my daughter?
What's the motive?
I just cannot understand that. I want to hear it from start to finish.
I think there was a toileting issue that night that has been dismissed and underplayed.
Okay, toileting, explain.
A bedwetting or a toileting issue.
That caused Patsy to get mad at her daughter.
Absolutely.
And say, slap her or hit her or...
I don't know. I'm suggesting that there was an explosive encounter because Patsy at one point put the child in clothes, a red turtleneck, for example, not the same clothing she was found in deceased. The following day, I think something happened in that bathroom. Right.
Steve Thomas's theory is based on...
You're not going to answer.
Is that our child wet her bed and we slaughtered her. That is so preposterous.
You weren't there, John. You can't know.
I was there. I know Patsy. I've lived with her for 20 years. I know that she loved that child more than anything in the world. I would have given my life for JonBenet. Patsy would have given her life for JonBenet.
Patsy, you could have been arrested in this case.
I wish I had been, and then we would have had a free and fair trial, and you would have met your Waterloo, Mr. Thomas.
Are you saying that you would have let her answer the question, John?
Steve,
why won't you let your wife answer the question?
Because you have assaulted her. You've called her a murderer. You have checked 73 suspects and said because Patsy's handwriting was the only one that couldn't be eliminated, therefore she is a murderer. That is absurd.
Soon after that interview, John and Patsy Ramsey sued Steve Thomas for libel, and they settled out of court. A district court judge also ruled that the weight of the evidence points to the intruder theory, which would exonerate the Ramseys. But even after all that, the story didn't go away. In 2006, the mystery became even more bizarre when a strange man living in Thailand made a startling confession.
I love JonBenet and died accidentally. No.
Let's set it straight. Are you saying you never said you harmed a child?
I'm saying that I believe that you're leading into an area that...
But it's simple, John. You either said I did or said I didn't. I'm not asking
well,
about
I am saying that I've never harmed a child.
Okay.
I'm saying it right now.
Okay.
I'm saying that I would protect any child who I thought was being harmed.
Right.
I don't ever recall saying that I did harm a child.
John Mark Carr's confession turned out to be a hoax. He was released. Sadly, in 2006, Patsy Ramsey passed away after a long battle with ovarian cancer. The murder of her daughter is still unsolved. President George H.W. Bush, president number 41, who lost a daughter younger than, 2 years younger than, said, you lose a young daughter, you never forget her.
Mm-hmm. No, it's very true. You never get over it. You have a hole in your heart that'll never heal.
A hole in the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. In other words, sometimes in every day.
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Martha Stewart was considered to be one of our nation's most respected and successful business icons until she was accused of insider stock trading.
You have no idea how much worry and sadness and grief it causes.
And I would imagine, especially if someone thinks, I didn't do anything wrong.
Exactly.
So that's got to drive you berserk.
Well, but that, having done nothing wrong, allows you to sleep, allows you to continue your work, gives you the opportunity to think about other things. But there's always the worry. I mean, a trial's coming up.
The trial went on for many weeks. To everyone's surprise, in spite of her wealth and power, she was found guilty.
We are disappointed at the outcome. We look at this as having lost the first round.
I appreciate your coming.
Thank you.
Martha Stewart. On Friday, she was sentenced to 5 months in prison and 5 months confinement, 2 years probation after that, and fined $30,000. If you had to do this all over, what would you not do? Would you just have not have sold the stock? What?
Well, it's a hard question because I sold it for a specific reason. It was going down. And I can't imagine. I mean, it's just such a conundrum to decide what I could have done, what I should have done, what I should have done afterward. There's so many variables, Larry, in a thing like this.
People make jokes. You're going to redo the jail?
Larry, it's not a joking matter.
No, it's not a joke.
It's not.
Do you fear it?
Sure.
What do you fear the most?
I mean, I'm not afraid to go to jail. I'm afraid to be incarcerated. I mean, it's a lack of freedom. My freedom is taken away.
Were you surprised at the sentence?
You're always surprised at something like that, I would think. And you can't say that you're happy. You can't say, I mean, I'm happy that it's 5 months in and 5 months house arrest, rather than 16 months in prison, which were that was the sentencing guidelines. And the judge stayed within the minimum. I'm grateful for that.
Tell me about that poncho, which has become some sort of symbolic thing. You still have it?
Oh, of course, of course. Well, the poncho was a very fortuitous gift from a very lovely lady who is serving a long sentence at Alderson. She made that for me as a gift because I had taught her yoga all during the time I was there. I put it on at the last second, and it was warm and cozy, and people went wild over it. So we actually took advantage of the fashion statement part of it, made that poncho, and sold almost 15,000 of them for Martha Stewart Living, all profits to go to women in need and also victims of the hurricanes.
The inside of a prison is a place you hope you'll never see. It can often change you in ways you can't imagine. By the time Mike Tyson was 20 years old, he was the heavyweight champion of the world. But his awesome accomplishments as a fighter did not exempt him from prosecution on charges of rape, for which he was sentenced to 6 years. We talked to him in his Indiana prison and were surprised by what we heard.
He's a playwright named Tennessee Williams said, we must distrust one another because that's the only way we could protect each other from betrayal. And I'm a great believer in that. I'm a great believer. I believe everyone that's involved in my life, one day or the other, will betray me. I believe that. I'm totally believe that. I'm just totally in all in believing that. And other people say no, 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 but that's what I believe.
If you believe that, you must be unhappy.
No, I'm not unhappy. I'm just aware of my circumstances.
Is there any, Mike, self-blame? Is there any time you say, I caused what happened, even though I may be innocent, there's a part of me that caused me to be here?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. We write our own story in life. Whatever we do, whatever good we do in life, we get good in return. Whatever ill we do, we get ill in return. There's no doubt about it.
So you think you're paying for something now?
Well, I think I've used bad judgment, and I mean, I had to deal with the circumstances that I don't believe was normally a fair circumstances, but regardless, it was the circumstances that I have to deal with.
12 years ago, shots rang out in front of the Dakota in New York City. The victim was an icon for a generation. The gunman was Mark David Chapman. As fans continue to mourn the loss of former Beatle John Lennon, many continue to wonder about the man who killed him. Someone who was also a Beatles fan. Someone who requested Lennon's autograph on the very night he pulled the trigger. After more than a decade in prison, the assassin says he's rid of the demons that drove him to kill and ready to tell his story. Are you saying, Mark, that the young man who shot John Lennon was not you? What are you saying?
It was me, Larry, and I accept full responsibility for what I did. I've seen places where I'm blaming the devil, and I hope that isn't kept going after this interview. I'm not blaming the devil, I'm blaming myself, but in the major sense, it wasn't me, because I'm better now. I'm normal, I'm functioning, I have a lovely wife, and we have a great marriage, as much as, you know, can be had from here, from Attica.
The circumstances of the killing, what happened?
The limousine pulled up, the door opened, the rear left door opened, Yoko got out. John was far behind, say 20 feet, when he got out. I nodded to Yoko when she walked by me.
She nod back?
No, she didn't. And I don't mean to be so clinical about this, but I've told it a number of times. I hope you understand. John came out, and he looked at me, and I think he recognized, here's the fella that I signed the album earlier. And he walked past me. I took 5 steps toward the street, turned, withdrew my Charter Arms 38, and fired 5 shots into his back.
All in his back?
All in his back.
Never saw it coming?
He never saw anything coming, Larry. It was a very quick, it was a rough thing.
Tonight, an interview with the man who terrorized New York for over a year, killing 6, wounding at least 7. He's the son of Sam, David Berkowitz. He joins us from inside a prison where he is serving 6 consecutive sentences of 25 years to life.
First, what was it like to kill someone? First time you killed someone. We all wonder about something like that. What was it like?
Larry, I don't dwell on that much, and I don't dwell on it at all. It was a horrible thing. It was a horrible thing.
You hated it while you did it?
Yeah, I felt that, looking back, I mean, I know that God has healed so much in my life and healed those memories and everything, and I'd do anything if I can go back and change it all and have prevented it from happening.
Has he healed you enough to look at it dispassionately?
Yeah, but it's still very painful, and it was a horrible...
Do you know why you were killing? I mean, we've heard about your statements, but people who may not know this case, you feel you were sort of satanically involved?
Yes, I was. I had made a pact with the devil. I had allowed this satanic thing to control me, and I felt these paranormal powers. I know that sounds so hard to understand, you know, but
explain it to me.
That's what was happening, and I felt somehow invincible. I felt that I had this power, and I was unknown to me. I was slowly being led down a path of destruction.
Did it give you a high? In other words, what was the plus for you? There has to be a plus. What did you get out of it?
Nothing. nothing.
So you were not happy when you were doing this?
No, no. I just felt like a brainwashed robot. I
Really?
just felt, yeah.
What is that like?
I just felt I had no mind. I felt something else was controlling me.
She's on death row, scheduled to be executed in a matter of weeks. Our special interview with Carla Faye Tucker from a prison in Texas is next on Larry King Live.
So you're asking for a commutation because I have changed. I'm not the person I was. I believe in the Lord. I'm a good person. I can help people. I don't deserve to die. Is that, in essence, a summation of what you are asking the state of Texas?
Yes, that's pretty good. Okay. To say that I am no longer a continual threat to society, which is one of the things, in order to give a death sentence, a question has to be answered: would this person be a continual threat to society and do bodily harm to somebody? No, I won't.
What's it like to kill someone?
It's horrible. I mean, to know that you take a human life, a very valuable, precious human life, it's probably the most horrible thing anybody could do. And I try not to take myself back to that night.
Do you feel that if circumstances were different, let's say you hadn't found the Lord you found and the feelings you had, did you deserve to be executed by the state?
I deserved a big punishment. I personally don't believe in capital punishment. I don't believe in abortion or euthanasia, so...
Therefore, no one should be capitally punished by the state.
I
Male,
believe
female,
that male, female, otherwise.
Do you think about being executed?
I have thought about it. It's not something that I focus on.
Got to think about it.
But I think about it more now than I used to. But I realize that today there's stuff to be done, and I have to allow God to keep me focused on what's for today while I share my heart with Him about what may happen whenever. But if I let myself think too much about yesterday or tomorrow, in that sense, I don't think I could stay as focused.
Carla Faye Tucker has been executed by lethal injection for the crime of capital murder. She was pronounced dead at 6:45 p.m., 8 minutes after the lethal drugs were administered.
You, in doing your job, really created one of the most visible people ever executed, and that's Carla Faye Tucker. And that decision weighed very heavily on my heart.
You watched part of the interview.
I did, unfortunately. I say
it has to affect you.
Of course it does, just like it affected you. And this is a very compelling story. And you know, obviously our hopes, our mutual hopes, are that she's now comforted by an almighty God.
On June 13, 1994, at approximately 10 minutes after midnight, a witness discovered the body of Nicole Brown Simpson, 25 years of age. An investigation was conducted by responding officers. It revealed the presence of a second body, an individual who has now been identified as Mr. Ronald Goldman, 25 years of age.
Mr. Simpson is a fugitive of justice right now.
Okay, I'm going to have to interrupt this call. I understand we're going to go to a live picture in Los Angeles. Police believe that O.J. Simpson is in that vehicle.
Tell the police to just back off. He's still alive, and he's got a gun to his head.
Now police radio is saying that Simpson has a gun at his head.
What's your name? My name is AC. You know who I am, goddammit.
And then there was the trial. The most controversial case of modern times. It polarized the nation. Some people said he was not guilty. Others say he got away with murder.
As officer of the court, he has lied to this court. He is impeached by his own witness.
I ask that you put a stop to it.
I'm stricken again by the preposterousness of the claims of the defense. And now you're changing that testimony. Is that what you're doing, sir?
Yes.
statements that you make about me and race, Mr. Cochran.
Well, you should
and I'll indicate to the court.
Wait. I'm about to hold both of you in contempt.
A little sticky and moist. 2 fingers were stuck to the glove that looked like it was stuck there with some type of a liquid. I didn't touch it.
Grabbed Nicole, told her to get out of his house. Wanted us all out of his house. Picked her up, threw her against a wall. Picked her up, threw her out of the house.
Now put this knit cap on. Now, you've been seeing me for a year. If I put this knit cap on, who am I? I'm still Johnny Cochran with a knit cap. And if you look at O.J. Simpson over there, and he has a rather large head, O.J. Simpson in a knit cap from 2 blocks away is still O.J. Simpson. It's no disguise. It's no disguise. It makes no sense. It doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder. Orenthal James Simpson has, in this case, been convicted of at least 1 crime, murder of the first.
Last June 13th, 94. Was the worst nightmare of my life. This is the second.
Does it drive, for want of a better term, drive you a little nuts that he is free?
Without question. This is the man that we believe murdered 2 people, and he's walking free.
They set the stage that the killer wore these gloves. These were the killer's gloves. And they asked O.J. Simpson to try the gloves on, and the gloves didn't fit. And I thought that was a defining moment in the trial.
To suggest that Furman planted the glove, and it is O.J. Simpson's glove. Now, I know some people are in denial about that, Larry, but I'm sure O.J. knows it's his glove, too.
And you know it's his glove?
I know it's his glove.
Why didn't it fit?
It did fit. I think that if you cock your finger the right way, I think that if you struggle with it the way he did. We had pictures of O.J. Simpson wearing the exact same model of glove.
When it happened in court, did you know you were in trouble?
It wasn't until I went upstairs and left the courtroom that I realized that people thought that it was a monumental failure, a monumental mistake.
I can tell you this, Larry, that based on the evidence in this case, based on the evidence the jury heard and the instructions the judge gave, there was not only reasonable doubt, there was real doubt.
Did you resent when people would make jokes and say, this is a 10-minute Columbo, this is open and shut?
No, I didn't resent, I agreed. It's true, it's a no-brainer of a case.
Shouldn't you have won?
Yes.
If his blood's there, Lee, I mean, we could go around it and we could code it, but, and I know him a long time, you know him a long time. If his blood's there, that's quid pro quo.
Where? What blood are you talking about?
O.J.'s blood.
Oh, for goodness sakes. The only blood at the scene that's traced to O.J. is some drops that were placed there, Lord knows when, by someone standing still. Now, no killer stood still that night at Bundy. The rest of the blood evidence is nonsense.
Nonsense?
You bet.
But what do you believe?
What I believe is something that really is of no importance, and I'll tell you why. That's a moral judgment. And I can't make moral judgments.
With us on the phone now is O.J. Simpson. How are you?
I'm doing fine, and one, I want to thank you a lot, because so many of my friends have told me that you've been fair in hosting your show and bringing the points of view from both sides. Most of all, I want to thank that man, Mr. Johnny Cochran, for believing from the beginning, listening, and putting his heart and soul on the line to send me home and spend time that I'm spending right now with my kids.
We do believe there are killer or killers loose on this case because they rushed to judgment, Larry. O.J. Simpson was handcuffed within 30 seconds of arriving back here from Chicago on June 13th. They never looked at anyone else.
Well, then shouldn't people in Brentwood be frightened?
Well, I don't want to cause any hysteria or cause people to be panicked, but I think somebody should be looking for whom we believe are the real killers in this case.
Good evening. Tonight, the Clinton White House faces a huge crisis over another allegation of sexual impropriety by the president.
It was learned today that independent counsel Kenneth Starr, who was appointed to look into the Whitewater scandal, is now investigating charges that President Clinton had an affair with a White House intern, Monica Lewinsky. Kenneth Starr found out about Lewinsky from another former White House staffer named Linda Tripp. Tripp worked with Monica Lewinsky at the Pentagon. Sources say Tripp gave Kenneth Starr audio tapes of several conversations she had with Monica Lewinsky in which Lewinsky allegedly discussed an affair with Clinton.
First time I ever looked into his eyes close up and was with him alone, I saw somebody totally different than I had expected to see. And that's the person I fell in love with.
If what we hear is all true, and this is a big if because there's a lot to go down the road and we don't want to ever make assumptions, how do you explain that such a bright person and a brilliant politician would get like this?
I don't think you really want me to answer this and be honest.
Why?
Well,
be honest.
Because I
you
would
know
say,
him? Because
well,
why do bad things happen?
I would
to
think
good?
he was thinking with another head instead of this one.
I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
I was a 22-year-old foolish kid, and there was this charismatic, powerful man who was standing there showing interest in me, and I was attracted to him, and I think I was swept up, you know, with the power of the presidency, and later found myself swept away by the government as a result of it.
The navy blue dress. Now, all I would say to you is, the future is a blank slate. I don't know what will happen. I would rather you had that in your possession if you need it years from now. That's all I'm going to say.
The thing that got you in the most trouble for Linda Tripp's popularity is betraying a friend.
Right.
How do you defend that?
Look, let's not forget what I was facing. I'm going to lie. He's going to lie. We are all going to lie. If you don't lie, perjury, jail.
We are about 15 seconds away from the address of his presidency. We've taken out of the White House and the President of the United States.
Good evening. This afternoon in this room, from this chair, I testified before the Office of Independent Counsel and the grand jury. I answered their questions truthfully, including questions about my private life, questions no American citizen would ever want to answer.
All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No.
After a devastating impeachment vote in the House, can President Clinton rally enough support from the American people to help save it in the Senate?
The Senate adjudges that the respondent, William Jefferson Clinton, President of the United States, is not guilty as charged in the first article of impeachment.
What could have prevented this?
For the President of the United States to have simply said, I made a really bad mistake, and not to have deceived the American people, not to have lied to his own cabinet, but just said, I goofed.
How did you emotionally hold up through all that?
Well, I'm here.
I know, but how? What is it? Is some sort of inner thing in you, a get up off the floor, the comeback kid approach? Is that part of your structure? Where does that come from?
All my life, I was raised to believe that you should never give in, never give up. When somebody hits you and knocks you down, you're supposed to get up, not give up.
One of the most colorful characters on the political scene in 1992 was Ross Perot. A lot of people wanted him to run for president. On my show, he made an announcement of sorts.
By the way, is there any scenario in which you would run for president? Can you give me a scenario in which you'd say, okay, I'm in?
If you're that serious, you, the people, are that serious, you register me in 50 states. And if you're not willing to organize and do that, then this is all just talk. Stay with me, Larry.
Are you
I'm saying to the ordinary folks, and I don't want any machine.
This is a draft, Ross Perot?
No. I'm not asking to be drafted. Okay. I'm saying to all these nice people that have written me and the letters, filled cases. Now, if you're dead serious,
Start
then
committees in
I
Florida,
want to see
Georgia.
some sweat.
Are you
Job,
saying
unless you will
groups all
go
across
in the
America, now in New York, Illinois, California, start forming independent groups to get you on the ballot as an independent, and you would then, if this occurred in 50 states with enough people, you'd throw the hat?
I am not encouraging people to do this, but
If
the
they
push
did.
has come from them. And if you're not happy with what you see and you want me to do it, then I don't want any money from anybody but you. And I don't want anything but $5 from you, because I can certainly pay for my own campaign. No ifs, ands, and buts. But I want you to have skin in the game. I want you to be in the ring. Now then, God bless you all who have written me and called me. The shoe is on the other foot.
Even though Ross Perot did not win in 1992, he still remained a powerful and controversial figure in American politics. We invited him back on the show to debate Al Gore on the merits of the North American Free Trade Agreement, commonly known as NAFTA. And this turned out to be one of the highest-rated shows in cable history.
You were hedging early. What changed?
Well, we negotiated 2 side agreements that protect labor and protect the environment. And not until the 2 side agreements were completed did we agree to support NAFTA.
What turned you against it, if you were in favor of it?
Well, conceptually, I'm for free trade.
Do you favor some sort of NAFTA?
Absolutely.
Then what's your rub?
The problem is, this is not good for the people of either country. After many years of having U.S. companies in Mexico, this is the way Mexican workers live all around big new U.S. plants. Now, here's a good, decent man working his heart out, making his cardboard shack, and the cardboard came from boxes that were used to ship the goods down
Can I
there.
say something about this?
I didn't interrupt you.
Okay, now, guys.
U.S. companies, because it is so difficult to do business in this country, can't wait to get out of this country and go somewhere else, and, if possible, get labor that costs 1/7 of what it costs in the United States.
How would you change it? How would you change it?
Very simply, I would go back and study. First, we should look at this. It doesn't work.
Well, what specific changes would you make in it?
I can't, unless you let me finish, I can't answer your question. Now, you asked me, and I'm trying to tell you.
All right. Well, you brought your charts tonight, so I want to know what specific changes you would like to make in the treaty.
If you're against it, let them respond.
How can I answer if you keep interrupting?
Go ahead. You go ahead. Now, let me tell you who else has taken the time. Every living former president of the United States in both parties, the 2-termers and the 1-termers.
It doesn't impress you that every former president supports
it? impresses me that they couldn't do it.
Oh, but doesn't impress you that they support it?
That they show, those are the guys that cut the worst trade deals in history. He's already talked about.
It's not over with.
Wait just a minute now. They did the Japanese deals. They did the Chinese deals. God bless them. They cost you 2 million jobs. 2 million jobs.
You think they fooled Colin Powell?
He's a great soldier. Doesn't know anything about business. All right, folks, Rio Grande River is the most polluted river in the Western Hemisphere.
Let him respond.
Tijuana River is the most they've had to close the beaches.
But all this is without NAFTA, right?
Yeah, let me respond to this if I could, would you?
This is after years of U.S. companies going to Mexico, living free.
But they could do that without NAFTA.
But we can stop that without NAFTA, and we can stop that with a good NAFTA.
How do you stop that without NAFTA?
Just cut that out, pass a few simple laws on this, just make it very, very clear.
Simple laws on Mexico?
No.
How do you stop it without NAFTA?
Give me your whole mind.
Yeah, I'm listening. Okay. I haven't heard the answer, but go ahead.
That's because you haven't quit talking.
Well, I'm listening. How do you stop it without NAFTA?
Okay. Are you going to listen? Work on it.
There never was a political scandal in the history of the United States that matched the Watergate break-in and cover-up and the mystery surrounding the identity of the man known only as Deep Throat. Was Deep Throat a key to this? No Deep Throat, no story?
Well, that's a real if-history question. I mean, he was part of it. He's a source that lots of people have focused on, but we had, I think one point we went through and listed that we had 50 to 60 sources.
You're always asked to name them. Why aren't you asked to name them?
He met with Bob.
You never met with him?
I'm not going to get into that question or not.
See, isn't that good? We're still capable of protecting our secrets.
NBC in a funny report tonight said, it's not Hague because Woodward says it's not Hague. Well, you're not going to say it's Haig. If I say it's Haig, you're not going to say yes.
That's the one thing that we've said.
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
what...
Haig. I don't know why you said it in the first place, but you did.
But if I named the person tonight, if I said Clarence Mitchell, you would say, no, it isn't Clarence Mitchell, right?
You are not Deep Throat.
33 years after the Watergate break-in, 31 years after Nixon resigned, the identity of Deep Throat was finally revealed. Tonight exclusive, in his first and only TV interview since being revealed as Deep Throat, former FBI official Mark Felt, the once secret source who played a key part in unraveling the Watergate scandal and ending the Nixon presidency. Were you surprised that it was a secret for so long?
Yes, I guess I was.
Did you like being called Deep Throat?
Well, yes. Some ways I do. I'm proud of everything Deep Throat did.
Because there were some who said that you were kind of like a traitor to the cause. There were a few, certainly on the Republican right side, complained that you were turning the tide on your boss.
That sounds like Republican approach.
I had no prior knowledge of the Watergate break-in. I neither took part in nor knew about any of the subsequent cover-up activities.
You've had a long and distinguished career, great career in the FBI. You write about it in the book, etc. You were a G-man's G-man.
Thank you.
You were an FBI guy.
He was one tough SOB. He was somebody who really wouldn't answer a lot of questions, gave us some information, some hints, laid out a blueprint, was vital to the coverage.
Why did you decide to help Woodward? Why did you decide to do what you did?
Because he was doing a good job.
No other reason?
No other reasons.
You felt that he was doing what he had to do and you would support him?
Right.
He's the guy who told the truth in all of the discussion about whether he should or whether he shouldn't. He told the truth, and that's not a bad starting point for any of us.
Well, I think somebody had to work on the inside. They had to be honest and had to be reliable. And if I could do that and fit into that category, that was fine. That was what I wanted.
Carl, is he a hero?
I certainly salute him. He said an amazing thing there. He said there had to be somebody honest on the inside and be reliable. I salute him for that. I think that he did a great thing under difficult circumstances, and I wish at a time of another aberrant presidency we had more people with his values as he expressed them during Watergate today.
Good evening from Washington. Tension is high in Waco, Texas, on day 4 of the standoff between federal agents and David Koresh, leader of the Branch Davidian cult. Koresh had promised to give up peacefully yesterday, and now he says he must wait for further instructions from God. 4 federal agents and at least 10 cult members are dead after an unsuccessful raid on the compound Sunday.
There are 110 men, women, and children, an estimated 20 children still in the compound. They have a lot of food, water, and ammunition. The FBI and the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms people say they're not going to attack the facility. They just want to wait and see if they can negotiate an end to this.
There's a full range of possibilities that could happen. Everything from a Jim Jones scenario to walking out naked. But, he's the Messiah, and it may be time for him to transfigure into heaven and take all of his followers with him.
And, Gene, you are, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're begging your grandson to come out, right?
Well, I wish that all the people up there with the guns ready to do whatever. I can't say they're ready to run in on him and kill him, but I say if they would leave and get away from there instead of trying to just stay there, I think everything would be all right. I think he'd come out.
Good evening from Washington. The Waco standoff ended in the worst possible way. More than 80 deaths by fire, apparently a mass suicide ordered by a cult leader, David Koresh. The victims include 17 children and Koresh himself, his doomsday prophecy finally fulfilled. Now come the questions. Did federal authorities take every possible step to end the stalemate peacefully? Could today's fire have been foreseen? For answers, we turn to the official who approved all the action,
our new Attorney General, Janet Reno, appointed just 38 days ago. Because you stepped into the situation. It was there when you took office. As you look back, and there'll be major investigations, and a lot of people today are questioning, why did they go in so harshly? Was that a correct move? And that wasn't your decision.
Obviously, as you look at all the information that we had, as you considered everything that we knew at the time, we made the best decision I think that we could based on everything that we knew. Based on what we know now, it was obviously wrong. At the same time, we were concerned that these were dangerous people. They had killed, and there was every expectation, considering their remarks, that they would kill again.
Did you talk to the president today?
I haven't talked to him yet.
No. Do you expect to be talking to him tonight?
I would expect so.
He said okay, right?
I explained to him that I had carefully deliberated, talked to everybody, that this was my best judgment. I wanted to keep him advised, and he said okay.
Was this the toughest day of your career?
It's certainly one of the toughest, and certainly one of the very most painful and saddest.
Coming again! Big one. Back up! Oh my God!
Tonight, memorable moments in the wake of the disaster, from the tsunami's staggering toll of death and destruction to incredible individual tales of rescue and escape. You're looking at the now famous wall of missing children. And joining us from Phuket now is Rebecca Badal and Ron Rubin. They are both tsunami survivors, and they found that little Swedish toddler alone after the tsunami hit. The little boy later reunited with his father.
I don't think it was until at least 2 or 3 days later that they knew that his father was okay, and he was in a hospital about 3 hours away from him. And then they were reunited maybe 3 or 4 days after the actual event.
Rebecca, what happened when it hit? Where were you? What happened?
We were woken by what sounded like an explosion, which was actually the first floor of our hotel being wiped out from underneath of us. Ron grabbed me, pulled me to the roof while the second floor got wiped out underneath of us, and we sat on the roof and watched the rest of the hotels and everything around us collapse.
Oh.
My first thought was maybe it's an earthquake or something, and then the water started to come in. So it was literally a split of seconds. And Simon was still in the bathroom, and he was just screaming, "Petra, Petra, what's happening?" And in no time, the glass broke, and it took us out of the bungalow.
Both of you went out?
Both of us.
Together?
Together.
Mm-hmm.
And I just saw a roof, so I told him, catch the roof. That was the only thing I could see we could do, and it was the last time I saw him.
What is the latest, Christian, from Sri Lanka?
The death toll here stands at 30,000, a little bit over that if you take just the government-held areas. But then the government says that with the rebel-held areas, the Tamil-held areas, that death toll goes up to 46,000. That's the second hardest hit place after Indonesia, which took the brunt of the earthquake, obviously, on Boxing Day. But this little country, 700 kilometers of its coastline, 80% of its main industry, which is fishing, has basically been destroyed, and they've got a lot of work to do to get life back in order again, not to mention the desperate loss of life.
The village of Lampaya doesn't exist anymore. 3/4 of its residents are dead. Only a few coconut trees remain standing. They now provide shade for 1,200 refugees. Among them, Rafika, 4.5 years old, and now an orphan.
In Huntsville, Alabama, Glenn Watson, who saved the life of a little boy, also he is a tsunami survivor, was vacationing in Phuket as well.
I grabbed onto the railing and tried to get into a position where I could get in between the two railings and maybe give myself a chance to get up the stairs, but the water was just throwing me around like a rag doll. Well, I grabbed the other railing, and about that time I saw the mother and her child just coming out of control, completely out of control. And I was close enough to be able to grab him. I grabbed him by his right arm and pulled him in close to me, and the water was trying to rip him away, and the water was trying to rip me all over. And I just held on with everything I had. We were underwater. probably 8 or 10 seconds at one time. And
what happened to the mother?
She went by. She made one look over at me, and I don't know if she's looking at me or her son. But I remember seeing that face. It was only for a second, and I'll see that face the rest of my life. I couldn't help her. I couldn't. I had all I could do then to keep the boy and myself above water, which I wasn't being very successful.
What does something like this do to you personally? What does it do to you emotionally? Do you grapple with the question of why a caring God would allow this? Do you question faith?
Well, first of all, it reminds us that we are not fully in control in this life. It's a humbling experience.
And you can't help but be moved. I noticed President Clinton talking to a woman in one of the embassies who'd lost both her mother and her father, and you know, it just breaks you up.
In the end, it deepens your faith when you see the triumph of the human spirit in the face of this kind of adversity.
On August 2nd of 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded the oil-rich nation of Kuwait. The United States launched Operation Desert Shield to protect Saudi Arabia's oil fields. On January 17th, 1991, Operation Desert Shield became Operation Desert Storm, and the United States was at war with Iraq.
We're going to Bernard Shaw in Baghdad.
Something is happening outside. The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated. We're seeing bright flashes going off all over the sky.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak. Ground forces are not engaged.
I know the members of the committee feel the same pride I feel in the professionalism and courage of those men and women who are now out there putting it on the line for us in the Persian Gulf.
You got to try and figure out how to accomplish your mission, but you got to try and figure out how to accomplish your mission with a minimum loss of human life. That's what being good generals.
They used to say that Eisenhower's first concern all the time was, how many do we lose in this operation? Sure. And it was painful to him to hear any numbers.
Of course.
Was it to you?
Terribly, terribly. You know, it scared you to death.
General Norman Schwarzkopf broke his own news blackout to say that the day-old Allied ground offensive is so successful and meeting so little resistance that he is speeding up the strike schedule. Meanwhile, the defiant Saddam Hussein claims to have foiled the United States-led ground offensive, although thousands of his soldiers have already been captured. Good evening. It will never be said that James Webb was an old soldier who didn't die but just faded away. He has remained outspoken against President Bush's war policy and insists that a battlefield success won't guarantee victory.
What upset me was, first of all, that the president, on his own initiative, dragged the country in by sending all of the ground troops in before he went to the Congress to get authorization.
But he had a tyrant who took territory that didn't belong to him.
Well, yes, he did. And there are a number of other tyrants in that region who are equally odious.
Saddam Hussein in the past has not hesitated to use weapons of mass destruction against some of his own people, including, on occasion, the Kurds.
Hi, Larry. How you doing?
Fine.
Okay, when the result of all the atrocities being reported out of Kuwait, why shouldn't the Allied forces go in and get Saddam himself? Even Mubarak has said that he doesn't trust the man.
I wouldn't waste one life or jeopardize one American to get this son of a gun unnecessarily. We don't want to give the Arabic world the idea that we're really in there to occupy Iraq. We don't need to do that. We don't have to do it. And we can bring him to justice. And let's do that, though. Let's pursue him.
I think you're dealing with something that's imaginary, frankly. I don't believe he's going to be captured by the Allies.
Kuwait is liberated. Iraq's army is defeated. Our military objectives are met.
best part that I liked was when they was congratulating us on this good job seeing us here.
Thanking us for being here. I thought that was really neat.
This is not a time of euphoria, certainly not a time to gloat, but it is a time of pride.
What about the critics who say you should have gone to Baghdad?
That's crazy. That's 20/20 hindsight that didn't even any good, because if we'd gone to Baghdad, we might still be in there fighting a guerrilla war. We would have lost many, many more American lives. The critics who say that don't consider how many lives we would have lost.
We were never going to go into Baghdad.
Never. People ought to go back and look at the battle maps. We never went into a single city. By design, because once you get into a city, you can't sort out the civilians from the military, the good guys from the bad guys. We didn't want to kill a lot of civilians. We deliberately avoided it. So we didn't go in any cities.
We had achieved our war aims and our political aims. If we'd gone further, many members of the Arab coalition would have split off. There would have been no peace process in the Middle East. Israel would not be at peace today with Jordan. So for any number of reasons, it was not the right thing to do.
In 1991, the Gulf War was over, and American troops came home. Tensions, however, between Iraq and the United States continued to mount. The inspectors came and the inspectors left. And whether Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction or not was not resolved.
Saddam Hussein agreed to allow inspectors in his country. And in order to prove to the world he's not developing weapons of mass destruction, he ought to let the inspectors back in. Yes?
If he does not do that, sir, what will be the consequences? If he does not do that, what will be the consequences?
That's up for him. He'll find out.
That's an excellent answer. He'll find out.
What does that mean?
Well, the president didn't say what it meant today, so I'm not going to prejudge what it might mean. My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence. Indeed, the facts and Iraq's behavior show that Saddam Hussein and his regime are concealing their efforts to produce more weapons of mass destruction.
The fact is, he hasn't complied. 4.5 months on, indeed 12 years on, he has not complied. And that is why it is important we bring this issue to a head now and get it resolved. I remain, as I say, working flat out to get it resolved through the United Nations. That's easily the best thing.
This body places itself in danger of irrelevance if it allows Iraq to continue to defy its will without responding effectively and immediately.
It is not knowable if force will be used, but if it is to be used, it is not knowable how long that conflict would last. It could last, 6 days, 6 weeks. I doubt 6 months.
Tonight, time's up for Saddam Hussein. His deadline to leave Iraq has passed. What's next and when?
We were told, as you remember in that televised address, that it will start at a time of the U.S. choosing, and so we still wait.
Do you think the country is prepared for what might happen?
I think the country is going to be proud to liberate a millions of people, a nation that has lived under the most brutal and sadistic kind of oppression for a long period of time. And I think we will be proud of the outcome.
Victory will mean displaying for the world the evidence of weapons of mass destruction, and then rebuilding the country with a multinational coalition and the emergence of an indigenous, transparent, moderate, democratic regime in Iraq run by the people of Iraq for them.
I'm going to interrupt. Ari Fleischer, the president's spokesman.
The opening stages of the disarmament of the Iraqi regime have begun. The president will address the nation at 10:15.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. We have no ambition in Iraq except to remove a threat and restore control of that country to its own people. And I assure you, this will not be a campaign of half measures, and we will accept no outcome but victory.
There it goes.
The tyrant has fallen, and Iraq is free. Major combat operations in Iraq have ended. In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed.
Is this poor planning? Is the aftermath of this war poor planning?
By any reasonable analysis, there was an underestimation of how long it would take once we got past the toppling of Saddam Hussein. There was an underestimation of what it would cost. There was an underestimation of how many troops it would take. Saddam Hussein and those who wish him well and who hate us, want to kill us, so far have had a better plan for the period from May until now. That doesn't have to continue.
Saddam Hussein captured alive. U.S. troops caught him in a raid last night, hiding in a camouflaged hole in the ground near a farmhouse outside his Iraqi hometown of Tikrit. Saddam, bearded, haggard, described as disoriented, had a pistol on him, was captured without a single shot being fired.
It's a massive, massive shot in the arm for both the Prime Minister of Britain and the President of the United States, who have been going through a lot of angst over the last 8 months with the violence, with the guerrilla campaign, the gathering sort of insurgency. But of course, really the underlying theme is the continued concern and worry about who exactly does run this insurgency, whether it is a one-headed monster or a multi-headed monster, and how this insurgency is going to be put down.
In your absolute heart, Mr. Secretary, was this a war of choice or necessity?
It was a war both of choice and necessity. We could have chosen not to go to war, but the president took a hard look at this situation. From the beginning of the administration, he made no decisions about going to war in 2001. After 9/11, we had to look more expansively at all the potential challenges we had.
Isn't it hard to send people to war?
Sure, of
I mean, you're
course,
part of-
absolutely. I mean, that's the most difficult decision any president ever makes.
To go see the president.
No, ma'am, you're going to stop right
No,
here.
you're going to let me go
No, ma'am,
through.
you're stopping right here.
I said I'm going to go see the president.
And I'm here to say it's a war based on lies and deception. And he needs to bring our troops home right now before any other family has to go through what my family is going through, or any other family.
Do you draw any comparison, as some are, to Iraq and Vietnam? Deaths occurring, more and more protests beginning to develop, anti-Iraqi feeling. See any comparison? You fought in that war.
Yeah, I fought in that war. I spent 2 years in that war, and one big difference is that Saddam Hussein is gone, and Ho Chi Minh and General Giap never were gone. We didn't defeat that regime. This regime, we did defeat.
We will complete our mission, which is a free Iraq, and we will. Of course, it's difficult right now, but eventually, and that's because there are people there who cannot stand the thought of a free society emerging in the heart of the Middle East.
Every day, it seems, we hear of more deaths in Iraq. Iraqis, Americans. Does that give you pause? Did you ever say to yourself, maybe we shouldn't have?
No, I'm absolutely convinced we did the right thing in Iraq. Obviously, we want to get it over with as quickly as possible.
When do we leave?
We'll leave as soon as the task is over with. We haven't set a deadline or a date. It depends upon conditions. We have to achieve our objectives, complete the mission. And the two main requirements are the Iraqis in a position to be able to govern themselves, and they're well on their way to doing that, and the other is able to defend themselves, and they're well on their way to doing that.
It's not going to be a 10-year event.
No, I think we may well have some kind of presence there over a period of time, but I think the level of activity that we see today from a military standpoint, I think will clearly decline. I think they're in the last throes, if you will, of the insurgency.
Because of their courage, the Iraqis now have a government of their choosing, elected under the most modern and democratic constitution in the Arab world.
I know the decision to remove Saddam was deeply divisive for the international community and deeply controversial, and there's no point in rehearsing those arguments over and over again.
We did not find the weapons of mass destruction that we all believed were there. And that's raised questions about whether the sacrifice in Iraq has been worth it. I mean, when you turn on your TV screen and see innocent people die day in and day out, it affects the mentality of our country.
Turning that country over to the violent extremists would destabilize that region. It would put at risk the neighboring Sunni regimes. If you were Iran, it would be the best thing in the world. It would be for us to toss in the towel. But the United States and the coalition countries can't lose that war, Larry. We're not going to lose a battle over there. It can only be lost in Washington, D.C. It's a test of wills, and they know that. They can't win anything. They can kill people, but they can't win anything.
But we lose when boys die and girls die.
Well, of course we do. Of course we do.
Any post-doubts about Iraq?
Oh, I believe that Iraq is going to, the Iraqis are going to turn out to be one of the strongest affirmations of the universal values of freedom and liberty.
So nobody died in vain?
No one, no, absolutely not. In fact, the sad fact is that nothing of value is ever won without sacrifice.
That's the agony of war, and I've met with enough families to know how it's broken their heart to lose a loved one. But I made the right decision, and we will succeed in Iraq unless we decide to quit.
So there's no doubt, if you had to do it all over again, knowing that WMDs weren't there, you'd still go in.
Yeah. See, this was we removed a tyrant who was a enemy of the United States, who harbored terrorists, and who had the capacity, at the very minimum, to make weapons of mass destruction. And he was a true threat. And yeah, I'd have done the same thing.
These are just some of the events that have shaped our lives over the past 20 years. It's been a fascinating privilege to be able to follow them, cover them, and bring them to you in a way we hope you've enjoyed and have found interesting and informative.